Welcome, everyone, to episode 79 of the Lookout Sir Warhammer 40,000 podcast. My name is Dan, and this is the bit at the beginning where I introduce my good buddy, Phil. How is it going, Phil?
I'm here. I'm still here, somehow.
Entombed within your own despair. I don't know.
Exactly. The floaty beard from last week is collapsed on the floor and is barely able to maintain itself.
Well, indeed. For context for everyone, we've just got off recording a very long Drukhari session that we started relatively late in the day. So the whole thing has been a bit of a faff, it's fair to say. But hopefully you enjoy the content. We got Paulie on, didn't we, from, Sky Serpent / Real Space Raiders. I mean, what a lad.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, you've skipped over the whole bit where you normally ask me what's happening in this show, and then I introduce it. There's no time for that. There's no time for it now. We're speeding on.
That's it. No, I can still do it. But what were we talking to Paulie from? What were we talking? What can we have possibly been talking to him about, Phil?
I know. If it wasn't obvious enough, we're talking about the new Drukhari Codex.
My God,
everything that. We don't even cover everything because there was just so much. But we try and squeeze in as much content as possible. And yes, Paulie, aka the Sky Serpent, aka that guy from the Real Space Raiders podcast, graces us with his mere presence as the master Archon that has ever been on this podcast. Sorry, Joe.
I feel like there you go. Oh, throwing shade. I understand. I get why you were doing it now. I just thought you'd gone into some kind of mad ramblings because it's now 12:30 and you want to go to bed.
Well, it's 50-50.
50-50. Well, don't worry, mate. We've still got, a little bit to get done, such as this 5-star review.
Peter!
Oh, hello, Dad.
What are you doing in here, son?
Oh,
What have I told you about wasting your time with these little plastic figurines?
It's not a waste of time, I like it.
How dare you talk back to me, Peter? It's about time you grew up.
I don't want to grow up. Oh, man, maybe there's something on the radio. Yeah, this is nicer.
Peter!
What's that?
That's right, it's me, the ghost of a award-winning TV and radio presenter, Jeremy Beadle.
Jeremy Beadle?
Yeah, that's right.
Wow.
Now let me tell you here, Sonny, my dad was always telling me to grow up, and I never did. And look how successful I was. So ignore him, Peter, and keep playing with that little plastic crack. And while you're at it, listen to the Lookout Sir podcast, which right now is time for the 5-star review.
Wow, thanks, Jeremy.
Who are you talking to with there, son?
Jeremy Beadle.
What? No!
This week's 5-star review comes from Apple Podcasts of Great Britain. That's right, another 5-star review from Apple Podcasts of Great Britain. It's almost like we do quite well in the Great Britons. I know I say that every time, Phil, but it's kind of the pattern now, don't you think?
Yeah, I sort of feel like everyone else who's listening from another country needs to step up their game and leave a 5-star review to show us UKers how it's done.
That's
or not us, because we can't actually leave reviews on our own podcast. That'd be wrong.
And we could do. It could turn out that that's what we've been doing all along, Phil.
I know. Each week we create a Gmail account and then create a Apple account from that email address, and we make these up every time.
Exactly. I mean, please,
takes
someone
about 25 minutes.
Exactly. It's time well spent. I do it on my lunch breaks. It's a great time. To be fair, we should probably just get into that racket. I imagine that would be a much better way of inflating our numbers.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Although, surely one of the 5-star reviews came from yourself, though, Phil. You must have given us at least one.
I mean, maybe the very first one, potentially. I can't remember, if I'm honest.
I mean, you didn't write a review, but you may have just put 5 stars in, right? That's easy enough to do.
Well, I'm sure I did, back in 2018 or whenever.
I definitely did. That. One of the many 5-star, scores that we have achieved is falsified because it's just me saying, yeah, of course, 5 stars.
Yeah, but to be honest, we both do on occasion or more often than not actually listen back to our own podcast. So we are listeners as well as content producers. So it's totally valid.
That is true. That is true. I do love the sound of my own voice if it wasn't already obvious. So, yeah, that's the way it goes. And someone who agrees, or rather also enjoys the sound of my voice, and yours too, Phil, let's not discount you from this equation, is Troll-face-killa. Troll-face-killa.
What a name.
What a name, right? I mean, it's absolutely amazing. That reminds me of the game Def Jam Vendetta, where you got to play as Ghostface-killa. And Ghostface-killa would introduce himself by saying, "I'm a ghost man, I can't be hurt." So obviously in this instance, this individual is a troll man, and I suppose a troll can be hurt unless it's...
Does he have a troll face and he's a killer, or does he kill trolls with a face?
I don't know now. There you go. Or he just exclusively dislikes the faces of trolls. But yeah, I suppose if you were to kill the face of a troll, it would obviously, by virtue of the face not being there, part of its head would be removed and thus probably result in its death. Unless, of course, trolls have, vital organs elsewhere other than in their heads. I don't know troll anatomy, it has to be said.
They might not need their faces.
They might not. That might be the trick with trolls. They don't need the faces. And they donate them to Troll-face-killa. And in return, he gives us 5 stars reviews like this one that reads, "Probably the best podcast in the world ever." So not just 40k, Phil. All podcastdom. So
that's
there you
pretty
go.
good. Pretty good.
Yeah. So this is a 5-star review. "Oh God, it's so good. Very clever format. One bloke has read a book and the other just seems to have a go." There you go.
Oh, I see. He's being sarcastic.
I mean, with a name like Troll-face-killa, were you expecting any less? But,
I feel like
yeah.
I've been trolled.
The clue's in the name. Clearly, he's done us. It used to be longer when the other bloke was in it. I could leave it. I could leave it on and go off to work, and it would still be on when I got home. He obviously had a relatively.
He knows how to artificially inflate our numbers. Thank you.
Exactly. Please, yeah. Could you do that more often? Just leave it running over and over again. That'll be great. Anyways, it's a third shorter now, as there's one less person talking. I've been listening for years, literally. Good work, lads. Great show. I hope this review helps you pay the bills. Well, there you go. There it is. I mean, that's probably one of the best reviews we've ever had.
It's pretty good, but spoilers, it doesn't, because we don't get paid for this at all.
No, it just costs money. That's all it does, I bought a new bit of equipment for the microphone the other day, Phil. It should be arriving tomorrow, like what you've got, the shock absorber thing.
Oh, fancy.
I know. I'm going to be like you. I'm going to have a shock absorber soon.
Amazing.
Anyway. But yeah, no, Troll-face-killa, thank you so much for that incredible review. Honestly, it's actually really nice. That's the kind of review I like, where there's a sort of air of cynicism to it, where you're kind of doing a nice thing and giving us a 5-star review, but you're also kind of being really mean about it at the same time. I mean, that's kind of, it's the happy blend, isn't it? That's exactly the sort of thing we like. Because if someone read that, they'd be like, why does this guy think show is worthy of 5 stars when he's saying this? But, it is. Creates intrigue, I suppose, doesn't it?
Oh, I guess so. Yeah.
And maybe that'll drive.
You don't want personal insults, though.
No, maybe not personal insults. I'm very sensitive.
Witty jibes are allowed.
Yeah, exactly. Just more general, kind of like ha ha ha. You're not very good. That'll do. Or maybe that is a bit too personal. Maybe don't do that. Anyway, Phil, go on. Say that Troll-face-killa is good, and we'll move along.
Troll-face, you're very good. You trolled us well. Tee. Thank you very much. We appreciate it, even with your somewhat dry, sarcastic sense of humor. Thank you. I know where you live, and I'm coming for you.
Blimey, there you go. I mean, could that not be construed as a legitimate threat? Because he now seek legal, recompense against that.
I don't know where he lives.
Okay. Yeah.
I back down
just
already.
Joking. Yes. Oh God! Don't send me any legal notifications. I'm sorry.
But you can send me a legal notification in the form of a 5-star review if you want to. There
you go.
By all means.
Make another account. Give us another. All right, cool. That'll do. Let's get on with the show. Transitional noise. Woo! Welcome back, everyone. In this part of the podcast, we are joined by the one and only Sky Serpent to talk through the wondrous world of Drukhari, as was obvious by the title of the video. But Phil's here as well, aren't you, Phil?
Oh, of course I am. I'm always here.
You love the Drukhari, don't you, Phil? You're a big fan.
I'm always on the painful receiving end of whatever they have to give me.
There you go. And you would not want to be on the painful receiving end of what a Drukhari has to share with you, would you?
Of course not.
And to elaborate on that, come on, Paulie, talk to us, man. Say hello to the people.
Hello, people. How do you do? It's Paulie, aka Sky Serpent.
What a incredibly fresh and professional sounding introduction you did there, mate. It's almost like you've done that
Do
before.
a podcast now, don't I? I learned from you, Dan. I learned
Mate.
of how to introduce oneself on a podcast. It's very exciting.
I'm glad that you've credited me with your with your process of becoming a superior podcaster. What is that podcast though, Paulie? I've never heard of it. Where might I find information about it on the interwebs?
So there is a Dark Eldar podcast called Real Space Raiders, which you can find on all of your normal podcast platforms, such as Buzzsprout is where we're hosted, Spotify, iTunes, and all those other lovely places. We're on Facebook and Instagram as well. And just search for Real Space Raiders Drukhari podcast. We've been going since May. We're an alliance of UK Drukhari Archons, and we talk about Drukhari on the Drukhari podcast. Who would have thought it? We cover everything now, from match play to narrative, and a lot of hobby on there as well. And we're all people, one thing in common, that we love Drukhari and love talking about it, and we love killing the monkey.
That went on just probably long enough to be slightly cringeworthy there, Paulie. I was like thinking to myself, like, wow, that was a really thorough introduction, but appreciate it, mate. It was good that you got to the point. Now, no one
attention to detail.
Exactly, man. Exactly. Like the agents of Vec themselves. You're always scheming in the background or whatever.
But not as good this edition. Who knows? We'll talk about it in a bit.
Well,
right?
I don't know. We can get onto that, I suppose, in a bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, man. But yeah, so ultimately, if you guys like Drukhari and you haven't checked out the Real Space Raiders, Paulie and the guys over there, who's the crew that you've got on that these days? You used to have Joe on the show, much like ourselves, but he left you, didn't he?
Yeah, we used to have Joe. I think Joe's been on every UK podcast now, hasn't he?
Yeah, just about, man. He gets around.
No, I love Joe. He's doing a great job, isn't he, at Vanguard?
Yeah, good.
No, we're joined by...
He's a good boy.
He's a good boy. He's a good boy.
Little beauty. Anyway, sorry.
We're joined by Dark Saturday Dom. He's really dommy. And you have
really
George.
Dommy, there you go.
He's really dommy. There we go. And George. George. That's what you like to call him.
Yeah.
His name comes from, we're looking for different names for people, because obviously I'm a Sky Serpent. Dom's Dark Saturday Dom. And then George is like, the listeners like think of a name. Some guy just like grotesque George. And we thought, that's a bit rude. So we twist on his head, and that's why he's Gorgeous George. So there we go.
Phil, you had one before, wasn't it? Where you were weren't you just like Watch Master Phil or something? Isn't that what they gave you?
No, not I'm aware of. We've never really done nicknames.
You did at one point. You said that someone said, "Oh, you could be so and so Phil with relation to the Krieg," but it turned out that it was quite a low rank and that you were relatively disappointed by it.
Oh, I can't remember that at all. But
my God, Phil.
Maybe Watchmaster. Well, Watchmaster sounds cool, but it does just mean sergeant. So,
yeah. I mean, not that being a sergeant is anything to sniff at, right? I mean, better that than just your everyday grunt.
But exactly. Yeah.
Anyway, there we go. Well, that's the introductions out of the way. As I say, if you're interested in Drukhari stuff, check out the Real Space Raiders. Also, Paulie does a bunch of other stuff that's going to be linked down below, because we're nice like that, and it's always good to, cross-pollinate, share the love, show off, show off the goods, so to speak. But we're going to talk through the Drukhari. Drukhari are now, relatively well covered over the internet as being quite a good book. And we hopefully will give you something of an insight into why we think that is, and then try and address the kind of broad ideas. Paulie's here because he, ultimately is going to enable us to fact check and ensure that we are somewhere close to accurate, being a, renowned Drukhari expert. And Phil is here to essentially ask silly questions, I would imagine, right, Phil?
I don't know what you're on about.
Fantastic. We're off to a great start. And I'm here as a kind of intermediary, because I have actually played Dark Eldar / Drukhari since their initial, third edition incarnation. I bought a lot of Drukhari when the re-release from, crikey, is it now almost 12 years ago, Paulie, since the initial range refresh? 2010. God, blimey. But yeah, so there you go. So I picked up a lot of that stuff back then and been playing them ever since. Off and on anyway. I mean, Craftworld is obviously my main thing, but yeah, hopefully we'll be able to give some good insights. So the way we're going to break this down is we're going to go through the pages, pick out some interesting things that we find quite exciting, and just kind of take it from there. So for those of you who are reading along, we'll begin, as we shall, with detachment abilities on page 49 of the Drukhari book. That being, first of all, the raiding forces. If every detachment in your army is Drukhari, patrol detachments change the command point cost of those detachments 0 CP. If all cabals in the unit detachment gain Drukhari obsessions and gain stuff, which cult detachments gain Drukhari obsessions? Oh my god, I'm doing a terrible job already. Paulie, help me. What's this all about?
So it's very close to what we had in the previous codex, where you can take triple patrol, but they don't have any cost. But actually, there's a little weird hidden hack here where you actually gain 2 CP because the patrols, if your warlords in there, you get +2, which is normally a refund. But actually, at the moment, you would start with 12 and actually get 2 for taking a patrol for your warlord in. So it's really good.
Mm-hmm.
It's really nice. And I think because Drukhari, obviously, they're broken down into 3 different sub-factions, it's a nice way to be able to take them. Whereas if you stereotypically mix your obsessions or mix your sub-factions, you don't get the benefits. Whereas by sort of focusing and having separate patrols, you get access to those cool rules.
I mean, it's quite an interesting change. So this actually now will net you out to 14 CP if you do this technically at the moment.
Technically, but whether it will go past the FAQ as it intended, I don't know. But we'll wait and see.
That's quite incredible. Quite an amusing little change of pace. I mean, it is quite cool, though, that they still facilitate that. But probably the thing that's been getting the most attention from the detachment abilities is the real space raid. Obviously, very similar to that podcast we mentioned before, shill. But what's unique about this one is that if you take an Archon as your warlord, and then you take a Succubus and Homunculus and at least one of each core troop choice for each of the relevant sub-factions, if you will, that you then are able to keep your Drukhari Obsession abilities for Cabals, Witch Cults, and Homunculus, regardless of the fact that it is essentially a mixed detachment in some respects, right, Paulie?
Yeah, it just works really nicely. I think a lot of people used to have issues where, you bought a Talos, you want to run your Talos, but you don't want to have to mix your Cabal up. Whereas now you can lean heavily on Cabal, but then as long as you have one of each HQ and one of each troop, you can mix your army around to your heart's content and also not lose your obsessions. And there is also a special rule as well. So if you do this attachment, you have an Archon who can be your raid mastermind. And what happens is the Archon means that any friendly real space raid core unit that is within 6 inches of this model, each time an attack is made by a model in that unit, you reroll a hit roll of 1. So this doesn't just apply to your Cabalites, it applies to everything in that real space raid, which is core. So that would work on Talos, that would work on Scourges, that would work on all the different sort of facets of troops, such as Cabalites, Witches, and Homunculi. So really, really interesting. And I think a lot of people are trying to sort of tap into this and work out what great combos you can get.
By homunculi, you mean like racks, right?
Homunculi is a plural for homunculus, so the HQ level guys.
Okay. Well, that's why I was curious, because you said troops and then you said homunculi. So I was like, oh, do homunculi get to reroll ones?
No, so all the HQs, they're not core. So you can't have your Archons or your Succubi rerolling, but they're pretty tasty as it is anyway.
That's pretty cool, though, man. I mean, it's good to see. I like that. I mean, it's very interesting how Games Workshop now already are starting to show us even more flexibility within the very flexible system that was the detachment system that they gave us, obviously first in 8th edition and then refined in 9th. I mean, obviously we've seen this already with the Dark Angels, and now we're obviously seeing it again with Drukhari, which is really exciting. And I think it, poses some really exciting changes on the horizon for a lot of different armies, right, that have tried to have this kind of flavor before. I mean, I don't know if there's any that you can think of, Phil, that would potentially benefit from this. None of your Krieg would love a bit of this nonsense, would they?
Not I can think of off the top of my head. There were obviously specific detachment types going back in 7th edition, where they did do stuff like that, where you'd basically take lots of Gorgons and troops, or another one which was lots of Death Riders, and they were special detachments. I think for just pointing out for non-Drukhari players or people that are relatively new to the hobby, the odd thing about Drukhari is they're effectively made up of 3 sub-factions. So the reason why we're talking about needing to take 3 patrols is because you've got your Cabal, your Witch Cults, and your Homunculus Coven, right? They're your 3 types of units that form up your Drukhari army. And normally you can't just mix and match them all together, which is why you've got to take them all in these patrols. But then the Real Space Raid detachment is the ability now to sort of thematically mix them all together with your raid mastermind, who's the guy leading them into the charge outside the webway. It's cool that you've now got all these different options and ways of building it in a sort of thematic way.
Yeah, because it's good from a fluff perspective, right? Because Drukhari aren't actually really an army in the sense of the word. Like, they're a bunch of gangs and sub-factions and, little organizations that all exist within that dark city that I've forgotten the name of, or rather don't feel confident pronouncing. How do I pronounce that again, Paulie? Come on, help me out here, mate.
I tend to actually switch between 2. Like, it's either Kamora.
Really?
Yeah, no. I either go Kamora. I either go Kamora or Komora, I guess.
Okay.
There you
go. Not Komora.
Probably not that one.
No,
you know what? I think you hit the nail on the head in how, your typical raiding force, it's probably led by an Archon, and, sometimes he'll monetize it, or he'll, enlist people to help with his services. But then the Witch Cults will, come along, sometimes for the lulz, or they'll come along and say, beast back to arenas. And everyone will go just to have a good time, really, and bring back slaves and, sort of test their mettle. And the Reavers will go, the Hellions will go, to battle each other almost on the battlefields, but against the enemy. It's just, it's really cool. And, the raiding force ability and Real Space Raid ability are really fluffy. And I think what you're going to see throughout this book is good rules and sometimes powerful rules, but they all very much keep within the lore as well, which is really, really nice to see.
I like the notion of them all going off for a good time. Come on, lads, let's go on into real space and, have ourselves a party. What a lovely time. So the next section of this glorious book, as we are now deciding to, state it, is the Lords of Komoramara, as I've beautifully decided to call it from here on in. And these are essentially your upgrades. So for those of you who are more familiar with, the Space Marines, these are your chapter master style upgrades where you pay some additional points and you gain access to some additional abilities and bits and pieces. I mean, again, Paulie, I don't know if you want to elaborate much on this stuff or if there's much that you feel like is worth talking about, but there are 3 different variables depending on, what type of a character you were in the first place, whether you're a Archon, a Succubus, or a Homunculus. But yeah, is there anything that really stands out to you amongst this selection that you think's worth having a look at?
So I won't go into it word by word, but for me, this is probably my favorite part of the book. So this is really,
oh, really?
I love this. So there hasn't been sort of 2 steps or stages of Archons for quite a while. You used to be able to have like Archons and Dracons, whereas for a number of years we've only had Archons, and since the 2014 book we've only had like one type of Homunculus. Before you used to be able to have Homunculus Ancient, whereas now you can have sort of 2 again, and it's also an ability to have a Master Succubus as well. This is really, really exciting because what it does is you pay quite a meager amount of points, but what you do is you unlock a special ability for all of them. So, for example, the one for Archons is really good. It's Splinter Genius, and it means once per battle at the end of the fight phase, if this model is within engagement range of any enemy units, it can fight again, which is really powerful. They all get their own special rules. They all get their own exclusive relics and warlord traits they can unlock, and some of these are really, really good. For example, the Homunculus Master can have a rule called Twisted Animator, and in your command phase, you can select one friendly Homunculus Coven rack unit within 3 inches of your warlord. D3 destroyed models can be added back to the unit, and they can be set up within engagement range of enemy units that are already within engagement range of that unit, and that's great. So every turn you can just bring back racks. That's phenomenal, and that's only 20 points for that Homunculus.
Wow.
The best thing about these though is they unlock elite versions of troops. Now, any Archon who's been around Camorra for quite a while will remember Cabalite Treeborn. So Treeborn are an elite sort of version where, like, the normal Cabalite warriors, they're mudbloods, aren't they? They're the vat sort of grown sort of expendable troops, whereas the Treeborn.
I feel like you're getting into quite a lot of spectacular lore there that you're not really expanding upon greatly. So the idea is that the normal kind of, as you say, the mudbloods, as you beautifully called them, these are essentially, they're Drukhari more or less grown in like test tubes, right? They're like the test tube babies.
Yeah, that's it.
We're
not sort of Craftworlds. We're not sort of like your random guardians who go off and become painters for like a century and then decide to like be plumbers for a century and finally become guardians and dire avengers.
I mean, that plumbing needs doing, man.
Yeah, probably very good.
I imagine exactly. I imagine the sewage systems of Kamarama are an absolute disgrace.
I know, but that's like it's a bit of an oxymoron, isn't it? It's like it's the beauty of the place that is such a disgrace.
Oh, is that what it is? Okay,
yeah.
That's how it gets the sort of misty kind of effect that is over the top of it, I suppose.
Well, that's it. Yeah, that's
not methane.
Yeah, that's why they're also that jade color. That's not.
Is that what it is?
Light or anything? Yeah. Naughty people. It's the Sliff, mate. The Sliff. They don't look after themselves. So the Trueborn are like the elite sort of Cabalites. A lot of them sort of come from noble houses, and they have some of the best weaponry as well. And they're back now, and Hecatrix Blood Brides were an elite version of witches, where they're sort of in between becoming like a Hecatrix elite their own unit, and they're phenomenal. There's actually a brand new unit for this, so they're all part of the same data sheets as the troops, but they get special rules, which we'll pick out a few very quickly. But you have the Hemoxites, which are now elite racks, and that's really, really exciting. Whereas before, racks were elites back in the day, and over the last couple of years they've become troops, but now there is an elite version of them. But what we'll do is we'll get into that a little bit later on in favour of revenues, which is actually the next page. But
there you go.
Yeah.
But before we get there, we should at least talk about some of the things you've said, mate. We should dwell on them for a moment and let it, percolate, much like the filth around Komaromara. I mean, the Trueborn are obviously an amazing thing to see return. I spent an unlordly amount of time converting a squad of Trueborn using what were they called? The Corsairs from
that was the go-to conversion back in the day. And do you know what? It's still if anyone out there is looking for a really good conversion for Trueborn, pick yourself up some. I don't know what they're called now. They're called Dark Earth Corsairs back in the day. Probably Dark Elfie Corseros, probably in the AOS.
Corseros, yeah. They'll just add some unnecessary kind of Latininess to it, just to sort of make it work. But yeah, that was crazy, because the thing is like all I would do with it was obviously take like the regular Cabalites and then mold the Drake cloaks to the back of them. But it was ridiculously difficult to do because the molding of the backs for the Dark Elf models really didn't want to go on those Drukhari miniatures. So when you bought it all, you're like, oh yeah, this will be easy. And then you're like, oh God, this is ridiculously complicated.
It was not flush, was it? It was not a flush fit.
No, man. And getting it flush was ridiculous. The most difficult part of it was cutting off that little piece of shoulder pad to fill in the hole. Like, oh my God. Like, that was just the height of tedium. But it looked amazing, right? Like, I mean, when it was done, it was like such a instinctively like, yeah, that's what a Trueborn squad looks like. Yeah. I mean, Phil, mate, just to bring you into it, buddy, because I don't want to sort of leave you out hanging out in the cold on this one. Is there anything about any of that stuff there? Are you excited about the ability to fight twice? I mean, that always fills you with joy.
Oh, well, especially when you're on the receiving end, it's fantastic. Although looking at the rules for the Trueborn and stuff, it all looks pretty decent. Like, why wouldn't you want these if you could take them?
Well, exactly. I mean, I think Trueborn have always been one of those like cool things. I'm surprised that GW hasn't worked with like Forge World or one of its other, parts of its studios to give us something to upgrade. Because I mean, how would you actually? Because Trueborn is relatively straightforward, and but how would you go about like looking to convert the racks or the or the witches? I mean, what's the best method, you think?
So for quite a while, a lot of people make racks out of Necromunda Deluxe, and do you know what? That's what as well. It looks really good. They're sort of tall. They're in the cloaks. and it's a really good way to use all your spare masks and arms from your rack kit. Blood Brides has been a few different iterations. Some people like to use the Witch Elves from Age of Sigmar, which they look great, but the scale is slightly different. The elves in AOS are a bit more spindly in their arms, and sometimes kit bashes won't always look right, but they do look good. I'm looking at probably doing some conversions. I think trophy racks make, sort of elite squads look better. I know going back to George from the podcast, he's looking at using paint schemes a lot more, where he's got a really nice sort of metallic green sort of scheme with sort of white hair and pallid skin. But what he's doing on a lot of his elite units is going for like a really sort of dark red sort of crimson color, which really contrasts and makes them stand out in the battlefield as well, with extra facial tattoos. So I think with those, you can do it a number of ways, whether it's painting or converting.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? I suppose that's the thing always to remember, that you can do a lot of the heavy lifting for that kind of thing with a paint scheme, as opposed to spending hours on end modeling all these lovely looking bits and pieces. You're showing me what even is that? I can't even tell what it is. And now
it's one of my fancy new Treeborn I've been making. So I'm making my Treeborn out of the Lumineth Stone Guard kits. They're the Moo Cow people with the hammers. But what I'm using is the Moo Cow people.
The Moo Cow people. That means
everyone knows the Moo Cow people.
Phil, you familiar with the Moo Cow people?
Well, yeah, we've seen them in the previews and stuff. In fact, we've always said they would make good conversions for Eldari, Drukhari.
It's the hammer. The
hammer people. Hammer time.
Oh, the hammer cow. See, there you go. Moo Cow didn't do anything for me, but now I see the hammer cows. It makes much more sense. Yeah, I know that, but they've all got Moo Cow helmets. That's the whole gimmick.
That's it. But no, I've taken the torso from them because they're really they've got quite nice sort of cloaks. And they got that sort of spiky, puffed out sort of Rita from Power Rangers sort of like style shoulder pads, which is actually quite reminiscent of like the really old Dark Eldar. And for me, I'm going for quite like a sort of standard sort of look for these compared to the rabble that is my normal Camelot Warriors. But I want to go for like a bit of elite sort of like, we're Duke's boys, we're Duke Sliskus's boys, Treeborn.
There is. Stuff, so. I always felt like the Moo Cow guys were more suited to becoming like warlocks or something like that. But I mean, seeing them as Treeborn would be pretty amazing as well, to be fair. So I suppose with no further ado, we may as well just get into the rules for them, right? So, I mean, take it away, Paulie. Tell us what they got.
So you have to pay 2 points a model to upgrade your Cabalites, your racks, your witches, but you get 3 different things. And now you have to have a master version of the HQ. So you have to have a master Archon to have Treeborn. Urine and Lilith Hesperax both count as masters, so you can unlock them. And you can only have 1 master per detachment, which means so if you had a patrol of, let's say, Poison Tongue, you had a master Archon, you can only have 1 master Archon in there and 1 unit Treeborn. It's also worth bearing in mind very quickly that Real Space Raid allows all 3 of them to be masters. So your Homunculus, your Archon, and your Succubus can be masters in that respective detachment. So really quickly, we all gain 3 rules. And now the first thing is that they have to be capped at 10. So all the troops now can go up into units of 20, whereas the favoured retinues are all capped at 10. Treeborn are phenomenal. Really, really good. Now, the difference is their data sheets are the same as the troops. So what's worth bearing in mind is they become troops. They're not elites like they used to be, but they don't get access to any different weapons. So Blasterborn of old, they're gone. However, saying that you can still run like 4 Dark-Light weapons in 1 unit, because a unit of 10 Cabalites could have 2 blasters, a Dark Lance, and a blast pistol, which takes advantage of their rule. So all of their favoured retinues, they get +1 leadership, but Treeborn get ballistic skill 2+, which is really good. And then what have I told you? Which is good, right?
That is crazy.
Which is crazy good. Yeah. But then I'm going to hit you with the 3rd bullet point, where anytime they make a range attack, they ignore any or all hit roll and ballistic skill modifiers. So no matter what, that Dark Lance, which is cruising on a radar, it just hits on the 2. It shoots something of -5, which probably doesn't exist anymore, but it hits on the 2. It hits anything in the game.
Yeah.
Really,
I mean, something
really
could
fun.
still be -5. It just wouldn't matter.
Not the true one, they don't care.
Yeah.
They're just saying
Of a true one, they don't care.
really
I mean, that
good.
sounds legitimately fun, doesn't it? I mean, there is a good decision. I mean, Phil, you like the sound of ballistic skill 2+ troops for 10 points a model that never suffer any minus modifiers?
Yeah, really good. What's the default ballistic skill? Is it 3+ or 4+?
3+.
Yeah, so it's nice.
I mean, once you factor in all of the other buffs that they gave the regular Cabalites as well, and we'll get into that later down the way, but Cabalites overall have actually seen a pretty decent few little buffs and increases overall. I think their attacks have increased, their saves gone up to 4+. So getting this on top of that is, it's an absolute no-brainer for 2 points a model. I mean, that is an absurd amount of extra ability for 2 points a model. I mean, maybe you're not massively feeling it with your splinter rifles because, maybe you're not, but I can't really imagine that there's going to be too many reasons why you wouldn't take them.
If I told you you're going to probably run these in a raider and splinter racks mean that you always rapid fire, whatever your range at 24 inches, that's going to be pretty good.
Yeah,
and if I told you
that's pretty solid, isn't it?
Poison 3+, then you're going to think these true one are actually looking really, really good now. So
that's pretty reasonable, yeah. That poison 3+ combo, not to get off on a thing, is that a character granting them that, or is that just a general ability that they get?
It's an obsession. So every Cabalite's in an obsession. Look at that.
Okay, yeah. So it's a specific. Okay, gotcha. Crikey, yeah, that's proper bonkers. Because the thing is as well with that 3+ is it's not modifiable anymore, is it?
No, just straight on a 3+. And so if you are, going to get something which is, negating that, because you're the attacker, you'd always sort of get the pro of that. So the most part, you're always wielding a freeze, which is really strong.
Yeah. So if you've got a unit that can do something to reduce the strength or reduce the wound roll, doesn't technically apply to these things, right? Because poison is different because it's strength 2, but poison 3+.
That's it.
Yeah, it goes off on a natural roll of a 4+. So even if it's modified to be -1 to your wound roll, it's still 4+.
How does that work with Deathwing? Because they only can be wounded on 4s. If you shoot them with this 3+ thing, can you wound them on 3s?
I'd assume not, because the Deathwatch rule would override the poison. Deathwing rule would override the poison rule.
What is their rule?
Okay. Now you're going to make me go and actually have to check it. Hang on. I turned my phone off.
Well, it's similar to transhuman, and transhuman overrides it because transhuman just says you can't be wounded on this wound roll. So poison can wound on a 4 and you could buff it to 3, but transhuman ignores 1 to 3, which is what definitely does.
If it was a -1, it wouldn't. The +1 would outweigh that if you did attack. I see.
Yeah, because it's worded slightly differently, it does affect it.
Fine. So you still can only wound the Deathwing Terminators on 4+, even if you've got the 3+ variant, is what we're stating, noting that we haven't checked the wording. We'll make sure that we know the answer to that.
I looked that bit up earlier because I read up about it.
Oh, did you?
I did some research.
Oh, Phil, mate.
I think Phil's a farseer, isn't he? He's looking to the future. He knows this is going to come up in this little section.
Yeah.
He wouldn't want to be called Xenos scum like a farseer, would you, Phil?
Never.
You're a sanctioned psyker.
Astropath extraordinaire.
An astropath, that'll do. Yeah. Your third eye.
Ooh.
Anyway, there we go. So what do the Blood Brides bring to the table?
So their weapon skill becomes 2+, which is good, but there's several ways to get that anyway via the Serpentine combat drug and also from the Power from Pain table. But it's still very useful being 2+ off the bat. Like the others, they get +1 leadership. We haven't discussed this yet, but most Drukhari in combat have the new Blade Artist rule, which is really powerful. So on a 6 to wound, it's -1 AP. So your Cabalite warriors running into combat, they've got a render -1 on a 6 to wound. What happens with Blood Brides is this becomes it's increased by 3 instead of 1. So going into it a bit later, which is they're -1 AP in combat. So all of a sudden, your blood brides roll a 6 to wound, they're -4 AP. So they're just shredding through armor. Really, really strong.
Wow. That's insane. So they're what, -4?
Yeah, effectively, because they're -1 anyway, and then they're extra -3 because of blade artists. So they'll just be slicing through stuff, and witches are putting out 4 attacks each without drugs. So there's 42 attacks coming at you, hitting you on 2s, and then we'll go into drugs in a bit, but they're going to be good, and you're going to learn there's a lot of strats, especially if you weight yourself towards one particular cult.
There you go. Yeah, combat drugs being another rule specifically available to the witch cults that essentially further enhance their abilities, but we'll talk about that later on if you're not familiar with combat drugs. Don't do drugs, children.
Don't do drugs.
Unless, of course, you are. Don't do drugs, unless, of course, you are planning on joining some kind of witch cult, in which case, I guess, then...
Best way in, isn't it, really?
Best way, yeah, absolutely. You wouldn't want to be the only one not doing it. That would be silly. I mean, Phil, what's your vibe on that? You liking the sound of that, mate?
Yeah, it's all good.
Is this giving you hope that... Because I was going to say before about the detachment thing, we didn't really get a chance to get into it because we kind of moved on. But I was going to say with the detachment stuff for the guard, that gives me hope that we'll see some armored company options, right? Like that can't be out of the question with what we're seeing.
Yeah, I think there's potentially some options for stuff like that. So it'd be interesting to see what they would do with it. I mean, I've seen people go, they want to bring back the old platoon structure. I would hate to see that because it was never any good, and just meant it was fine if you wanted to take like 100 troop choices, which some people do. But otherwise, it's not really worth it. And you always had to shoehorn in some vets or whatever just to try and make up your platoon sizes. They could bring something back like that, or some armored company, which would be really interesting.
It would be, right?
Sure.
I think that's the thing. I like the flavor of that for sure, and I like what they're doing with these amplified troop choices. Because again, I mean, which one are you feeling more? You're definitely the Trueborn than the Blood Brides, right? Right, Paulie?
I think insert GIF, like, why not both? Like, at the moment, I'm running them all. They're really cool.
That's the thing, though. But if you were only going to pick one over the other, you'd go Trueborn over Blood Brides, right?
I think between the two, I think Trueborn get more innate bonuses from being Trueborn, whereas Blood Brides only really get access to that AP. Yeah,
I'm hearing that, yeah. I mean... Let's talk about the racks quickly, because to me, the racks have always been one of the more interesting attributes of the, or one of the interesting additions to the Drukhari range, because they've never really felt like they've established a place for themselves. They've almost felt like, I don't know, like the Gretchen or what tactical squads are these days, where they're kind of nice and it feels like you should want to run them, but you can never really think of a good reason to. I mean, is this going to change that at all? I mean, what are we looking at?
It's important to note that competitively, Coven were carrying Drukhari for a number of years, mainly Prophets of Flesh with their 4-up invans, with their Talos, which were just going along and smashing everything. Whereas Coven...
but the Racks weren't bringing much to the table, were they?
You say that, but Racks were pretty decent, actually, especially Prophets of Flesh, because you had access to Black Cornucopia and Stratagem. So you could...
of course you did.
Really good. And they're probably one of the best troops choices to sit on the objectives. And especially as we came into 9th edition, where Drukhari players had, they're a bit burned, they didn't get stratagems in, Phoenix Rising. And this edition is very much about trading on objectives and keeping them and making sure you can live on there for a turn. And a lot of Drukhari players moved swiftly back to Prophets of Flesh racks because they're so durable, because they go to toughness 5, 4-up invans. So racks really sort of found their place back in a lot of...
Fair enough. Well, there you go. An incorrect assertion by me there. But let's hear what the improved version of them are.
So Himoxite. So it's important to note, and it's almost, I really like how the Codex is laid out, but there's a lot of sort of Drukhari specific rules which are hidden sort of further back, which I felt could have been probably at the start. But essentially, what's changed now is there's no more feel no pain on everything. So
Yep.
the basic power from pain is now just a 6-up invuln. That's what you get. However, everything that is common gets a 5-up feel no pain. So it's actually really good. Insensible to pain changed in a good way. And what happens is turn 1, we'll go into the chart later, but turn 1 you have a 6-up invuln. Turn 4, everything has a 5-up invuln. What happens to Hemoxites is they get +1 to their save and invulnerable save. So they start the game on a 4-up invuln, 5-up invuln, sorry, and later in the game they'll go to a 4-up, and they can't improve past that. So it's really good. It makes them, for 2 points more, it makes them a more durable rack. And then you add +1 to leadership of the models in the unit, as per all the other favoured retinues. But their special gimmick is really nice. Once per phase, the first time a saving throw is failed for this unit, the damage characteristic of that attack is changed to 0. So shooting phase begins. Get shot by a las cannon, does nothing. Every phase you ignore something. So it's just it's really good. Really good. And I'm really considering, well, not considering, I am going to run 10 of these guys just as my backfield sort of deck chair unit, where they're going to be really, really hard to shift.
Deck chair unit. Brilliant.
Is the I mean, how many people are falling over themselves to shoot las cannons at these boys, though? I mean, maybe, I don't know. I mean, out of desperation now and again, perhaps, but like, yeah, I can't see too many people looking to fire las cannons at them. But maybe
las cannons are a bad example, but you're going to get, heavy bolters are pretty, decent now. They damage 2, whereas you fail your 5-up invuln, but you just ignore it. You don't have to roll those 2 invulns.
How many wounds do these models have normally anyway?
Just one. So this is actually pretty decent for them. And again, it's a durable unit. And say you had one of the master homunculuses that we spoke about earlier, you can bring back D3 racks, because these favored retinues, they gain keywords. They gain like Treeborn, Bloodrisers keywords, but they don't lose like witches, racks, or Cavalite warriors as their keywords. There's still lots of good interactions you can do with them.
Wow. Yeah, because that's the same as the infiltrators get that same ability for the Space Marines with a with their version of a little apothecary. I can't remember what that thing's called, but I think it actually might have actually had hex in it in some way, shape, or form, but I might be wrong. But anyway, yeah, that's definitely cool. And you are right, though, right? Like having those guys sitting at the back. How many points are these guys costing you normally? Are they 10 or 8, or what? Are they?
Racks are 8, so these are 10. So 100 points.
Well, that's all right, mate.
A unit of 10, which is going to sit there quite happily. Probably give it a hex rifle, take some shots at people. It's pretty decent.
Just chilling out at the back, firing its hex rifle, having a great time,
turning people to glass.
Right. Yeah, having a wonderful time, living my best life. What was I going to say with it? What's their leadership? Is it like leadership 8 or?
Probably.
Oh, he's having a check. Leadership 8, leadership 9.
Normally,
you can't imagine they'd be.
So yeah. So the racks are 7, the Akafis is 8, but being Hemoxites, the Akafis will become leadership 9, which is pretty good. And there's solid other obsessions which are going to boost them later. You're going to find out a Black Heart Treeborn is leadership 10. Really good.
Flipping heck. Yeah. All right. Well, there you go. There's some nice extra flavor for you. Amazing. So next in the book, it's all about the cults and covens and, all the different things that come along with creating the flavor of the different armies. I mean, obviously, these are the same as what you will have experienced for, Space Marine chapters and the like, or, the Space Marines as chapters and the like, or, all the other different variables that people are referring to now, your platoons, your whatevers, your craft worlds, and so on. And there are some here that have obviously, got kind of bigger places. I mean, I think one of the things that's really interesting about the Drukhari, and I may as well say this now, is the relative lack of special characters now in this book, and obviously the impact that has in terms of army selection. Do you find it weird, Paulie, that there isn't actually any named Archons in this?
Oh, I feel like you're setting me up, Dan, to talk to you for like half an hour about Duke Sliskus, but
I mean, not specifically, but
he's the only special character that's worth talking about, right? But it's
of course.
So Dark Eldar have had some decent special characters down the way. They had Credit the Vile when Games Workshop decided to make puns out of every special character name, and then they introduced some really good special characters in 2010. So Ashwell Vex made his comeback, Decapitator made his comeback, and there's some brand new characters. You have Baron Sophonix, who was a really cool sort of special character for Hellions, who had like bones of a Farseer, so he was very naughty. You can see a bit in the future. He was actually really good at leading beast packs. You might remember at the time. You had Lady Malice, who is Vex ex-lover, managed to best Kegarak in a duel and steal his heart. And obviously you had Duke Sliskus, who is the best special character ever. If you don't know enough about him, you need to go research him. He's essentially just David Bowie in space. He has all the drugs, so the witches love him. He has all the best poisons, so the Cabalites love him. And everyone who's anyone just leaves Comra and joins him just for the lols. He's fantastic. Really cool character. Never wears the same thing twice. He hates like non-Drukhari for passion. He's just an absolute lad. I love him. He's something that's where I take my internet name from, the Sky Serpent, because his arms are Sky Serpents. Fantastic. And then, without going off too much of a tangent, the Chapter House debacle happened when Games Workshop got in a little bit of trouble, where there's a bit of a law case and a lawsuit. And essentially, what happened is they stripped everything out of their codexes, which didn't have a model, and it hit Grey Knights a little bit, but it hit Drukhari really hard. So in 2014 we lost every special character without a model. So we lost all 5 of those, which is crazy when you consider there's effectively 3 Cabalite special characters who just went. And we've had no new special characters back. Lelith's got a new model. Drazar got a new model, but it's a shame. So I think
it is a shame because but one of the things I actually think that's quite good about it now with how they develop the rules is you're able now to project a bit more personality onto these armies, but also that you're not making decisions about what army you're going to take or what, cult or coven you're going to take based on the characters. You're actually looking more at, what kind of mechanics that you want. Because I do find with other army lists that the characters can lead you. Like I think a lot of more people will play Ultramarines because of Guilliman or Calgar, or just the breadth of characters that are in that range. And I think, a lot of the time, maybe they're not the army that are best suited to what you want to run, but you find yourself doing it because you like the characters or whatever. Whereas I feel like for yourself, right, you can express your juke kind of persona through any of these different flavors of army and breathe a lot of personality into that. So I think there is some pluses to it, but I am surprised how few Drukhari special characters there are. I mean, there's three special characters. It's got to be the least amount of special characters, bar the Harlequins and the Admech. I think even Admech technically have more special characters now, don't they? No,
they've
not. They've only got one.
Cool, and I think that's it. Because the guy that's doing the shush, I don't think he's a special character though, is
Shush.
Do the Genes in the cult have any special characters?
Oh,
yeah, no, I don't think they do either. Actually, I mean, maybe some of the variables are. No,
they've got lots of characters, but none of them are named characters.
But that would go against what GSC is, right? Like GSC with special characters doesn't make sense because, they're just these, uprisings. Like, yeah, sure. Okay. Maybe certain uprisings had leaders and stuff, but I think for GSC, it makes sense that way. Admech, maybe the same thing, but Drukhari, it feels really weird. Like, I'm fine with the idea that Harlequins don't have them because Harlequins are like, this troop of players that get together to put on performances and then go off and, murder people. But like for Drukhari, there's so much rich lore and, characters in there. I'm surprised that GW hasn't taken the time to try and breathe that into the range yet. And
they've had them. They've had 6 different special characters who've all been stripped out of the game. And you consider Ynnari, right, have 3 models in their range, and they got the same amount of special characters as Drukhari. It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, they do, don't they? Yeah, that's it. I mean, it depends whether you think the Incarn is a special character or not. I suppose it depends. Do you think an Avatar is a special character?
Well, there's only one of them.
Yeah.
True. There aren't multiple Incarns, are there? There's just the one. and like there are multiple avatars. But anyway, yeah, it's just it weirds me out because it feels strange that this army is absent characters. But again, I think as you said, it's very much obviously a situation brought about through business decisions as opposed to anything to do with the lore or whatever. But I was just interested because when I approach army list building and when I think about how I want to kind of express my army in the game, I am interested in like characters and I am interested in those elements because I think they can bring a lot of flavor to it as well. So yeah, it was just a curiosity in that sense. But look, there's loads and loads of different things. I think probably the one we should start with, mainly because it's the first one that's here, but also because it was the most synonymous of the Cabals, that would be the Cabal of the Black Heart, old Vex, fabulous fellas and ladies, to be fair. There's a bunch of different sort of obsessions and bits and pieces that you get for being Cabal of the Black Heart. But the thing that we probably want to talk about first and foremost is Agents of Vect, which is the stratagem so synonymous with beardy competitive play over the years, right? Like whenever you saw an Aeldari player, I mean, Phil, you know this well, right? Whenever you came up against Joe in a game, you were like, oh boy, can't wait to see what you've vect. Right?
Well, I don't think I've met a Drukhari player that doesn't take Cabal of Black Heart. It's like, it was the go-to one always.
Did you frequent the Black Heart, Paulie? You must have done, right?
Well, I started off very flayed skull with a bit of Black Heart, and I realised Black Heart was just very good, wasn't it? Because it had the best relic, the best warlord trait, feel no pain in your vehicles, and Agents of Vex, and it just became a no-brainer over time.
I mean, even I, as a hardened Craftworld player, had Black Heart detachments in my army because you just had to. They were just too good. It was like, what's that? 3 Razor Wings, all Black Heart? Sure, why not? It was too good not to. But it was mainly because of Agents of Vect, but also other things. But historically, what Agents of Vect was it 4 CP in the end for Agents of Vect?
Yeah, so it started off 3 CP, went to 4. And I think this must hold the record for the biggest change in CP cost between codexes.
Oh, yeah, easily. Because historically, it was 4 CP, and you did it, and you rolled a D6. If you rolled a 1, nothing happened. If you rolled a 2+, you prevented the stratagem from happening. And if you rolled a 6, you prevented the stratagem from happening, and you prevented the player who did the stratagem from having their CP refunded, right? Yeah,
they lost their CP, so they spent their CP when the stratagem never went off.
Yeah, so if you got a result between 2 and 5, your stratagem didn't happen, but you got your CP back. But if you rolled a 6 for it, they didn't get anything, which was crazy good. And you saw so many Drukhari players, or just players in general running Drukhari, taking battalion after battalion just to kind of like increase the amount of CP they had so as they could do as many Agents of Vect as possible. The amount of times I turned up to tabletops and someone said, there's my 12 CP, so that's 4 Agents of Vect, or 3 Agents of Vect. I'm thinking about when they were free CP. So there's 3 Agents of Vect there. Yay! So it was a good time. But anyway, now it is 0 CP, and it reads, use the stratagem after your opponent uses a stratagem, excluding command reroll, until the end of the battle. The CP cost your opponent must pay to use that stratagem again is increased by 1. This stratagem can only be used once. What do we think of that?
It is dead good. Like most armies, but not all, do have 1 or 2 strats that they rely on, or their build relies on. So if you're a knight player, rotate iron shields. You're going to do every turn. If you're a Space Marine player, transhuman, you're probably going to do most turns. There's plenty of armies that do have go-to stratagems. So if you pull this turn 1, you're going to cost them up to, potentially up to 5 CP extra. That's pretty powerful.
Even your basic, like Overwatch, make Overwatch become 2 CP every time they want to do that. There's lots of good opportunities, and I think the better players out there will probably go into a game knowing straight away what they're going to vect. And I think the more experienced the Drukhari player, they're going to realise what sort of strats are the most vectable ones, as it were. But it's good. You can't mess up because it's 0 CP, right?
Yeah, no, that's true. But you can mess up in picking one that the opponent isn't planning on using all that much. But I think it should be pretty obvious which ones I mean, if you're playing an army that you've never played against before, then maybe you'd be completely unaware.
The trick is going to be obviously getting the knowledge and understanding what the good stuff is for that army, and then being confident enough to do it turn one, because that's when you're going to get your maximum value out of this. If you wait to turn two to see, oh, he's used that stratagem again, and then do it, you're potentially robbing yourself of some value. But then it does create some mind games. But I think it's a rewarding mechanic because it actually requires you as a Drukhari player to be knowledgeable about your opponent, which again, I think plays in really well to the spirit of it, which is the idea of the agent's effect, the idea that your intelligence needs to be, you need to be well informed in order to get the most out of this. And, that kind of, to me, also adds a layer of kind of fluff to this, because it's kind of synonymous with what's happening here, that you're well informed that this is the sort of thing that these guys will do a lot. And yeah, if you are knowledgeable yourself, then you're going to bring that to life on the tabletop, which is amazing. But yeah, I think a lot of people, and I don't know whether Paulie feels differently about this, but I did see a lot of people were relatively displeased with this when it got announced. But I was immediately like, wow, actually, that looks really strong. Especially for zero CP.
Yeah, I think it's good. I think the old Vect was a bit of a crutch. And in all honesty, it's a bit of a feels bad. It's a bit like, I'm going to do this. And it's a case of, no, you're not. And then people wouldn't get upset, but you'd be foiling people's plans. Obviously, as Vex would like you to do, but I think it's a welcome change. And you know what? I think I use Vex a lot, and 8 CP, to use 2 Vex early game, and you could just never use any other stratagems apart from maybe a command reroll here and there. Yeah. Whereas actually for me, it's actually quite a welcome change.
So yeah, think how much CP it's going to unlock for your army now. It's like all these stratagems that are good you can actually now use. And as you say, it's very much before, it was very much like an anti-fun mechanic for your opponent. It's still not super fun, but it's just a bit more of an annoyance that it's going to cost them an extra CP. But that's something they can plan for, as opposed to, I've got to do this stratagem and now I can't.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think, again, I think if someone plays this perfectly against you, you're going to feel very annoyed by it. But then that's because someone played it perfectly against you. And there's plenty of things that will annoy you when they're done perfectly. In addition to, obviously, that stratagem, which is their specific stratagem, their actual obsession itself is pretty reasonable. I think, again, I'm not as knowledgeable as Paulie, obviously, at this point, so I wouldn't want to suggest that I think it's one of the strongest available, but it feels good. Like, when I read it, it looks like a good obsession. I mean, what's your vibe on the Cabal of the Black Heart, Paulie? Is this the auto-include that it used to be?
So it's got four bullet points, and this probably is the Cabal you're going to see a lot due to a few different changes. So it's got 4 different bullet points. They still keep the fact that they treat the power from pain table as being 1 point above. So you treat it as turn 2 when it's turn 1. Again, spoilers for later in the Codex, but your vehicles get power from pain now. So your Venoms get power from pain. And then if we were to tell you that your Eager to Flay turn from, if you turn 2 is no longer reroll charges, turn 2 is now advance and charge. So actually your Venoms on turn 1 are advancing and charging, and they're going pretty fast. So there's actually some really good play in this.
How far do they move now? It's 24 inches, isn't it, when they advance?
I think as a Venom's 6 plus 8, or Venom's used to be 16, plus these
16
still,
plus 8, yeah.
But what
so
you can
16
do
plus 8 for a Venom
is your Raiders can move 14, they can enhance Evercells 8 rather than advancing, and then charge because they're Black Heart. Like there's some really good tactics, and I think some people are like, why do you want to throw a unit over there? But actually you can just throw an empty Raider into a unit. And shock brows do some stuff, which you'll find out later. Like there's lots of really cool stuff, and I think if you haven't played Drukhari before, which obviously no one will have done in this new codex, there's lots and lots and lots of tricks that you're gonna have to not watch out for, but you're gonna learn. And there's some which I think it's going to be very hard to play someone and not accidentally gotcha having them ever so slightly unless they've read the codex and understand it, because a lot has changed and there's a lot of sort of sneaky, powerful things that you can sort of put on people. The other bullet point is if a real space raid attachment includes Cabal the Black Heart Archon, then until the end of the battle, all Blaze for Hire units in that detachment have the Power from Pain ability. Also treat the current battle round as being one higher than it actually is. So that's great. So all your Incubi, your Scourges, they're all treating it a turn higher. Add +1 leadership.
Oh, Scourges Blade for Hire?
They always have been, yeah. Blaze for Hire is like
really?
the mercenaries, yeah. So really good.
I just assumed just by the look of them they were part of the Cabal, but obviously not.
No, so it's weird. So the original Scourges were basically like Cabalites with jump packs. But now they're basically rich Drukhari who get bored and decide to go to the homunculi and be like, give me wings and web feet and let me fly. Like, and that's why they have all the expensive weaponry, because they just go a bit mental and live like, you know, in the Aries at the top
in
of
the trees or whatever it is. Yeah, because I think I remember the story about that. Yeah, the idea that they go and they get this treatment and then they have to essentially, as soon as it's completed, the tradition is they then have to fly to the top.
There, yeah.
And it's like crazy dangerous, and a large percentage of them don't make it up there. I love that with Warhammer 40,000, that everything involves the thing that made it to the battlefield being like the 1% of the race that was able to survive in its environment. Like, I always love the idea of all the, you know, all the many that died so as this one could be here. It's quite terrifying thought, really, in terms of the grimdark nature of it, but there it is.
The final part of the obsession, which is first for power, is each time a unit with this obsession is selected to shoot or fight, you can reroll 1 hit roll when resolving that unit's attacks. Now, this is brilliant. So that means all your raiders firing their dark lances naturally just get to reroll that 1 hit. Your cavalry units with 1 blaster, your blaster's always rerolling. Like, it's really, really good, really, really useful. You're going to see this used a lot.
Also, they get +1 leadership, which we forgot to say, although we did reference it earlier in this in this segment. But yeah, so +1 leadership as well is nothing to sniff at either, right? Because, you know, being of a higher leadership for that kind of unit is crazy. Because as you said earlier, Trueborn now a leadership 10, which is very, very good. But yeah, being able to reroll a hit roll is astoundingly strong. I mean, very, very, very strong ability. I'm sure there's many armies out there that wish that they had access to a similar thing. And it's the layers with this Cabal that's crazy. It's not just the fact that you get 1 point extra in the obsession. It's the fact that you get the reroll hits. It's the fact that you've got the +1 leadership. It's the fact that you've got access to what is quite a strong stratagem. And also your warlord trait and your relic isn't anything to cry about either, right? Because your warlord trait is, while this warlord is on the battlefield, each time your opponent spends any command points to use a stratagem, you can roll 1d6 for each command point spent, and on a 6 you gain 1 command point, which, as we know, command point farming is still a really valuable and powerful, you know, gameplay mechanic, right? I appreciate in 9th edition you're not as desperate for CPs as you might have once been, but still having that is broadly still considered one of the strongest abilities. I mean, again, I don't know, Phil, have you got an opinion on getting back CP? Do you feel like that's still strong?
Not on a 6+. That's a bit rubbish, I think, if I'm honest.
Really? Most of them are on 6s.
I don't know. The guard one was on a 5, but I
it's good though. This is for every command point that you or your opponent uses, and it's not the stratagem, it's a command point. So for the most part, you should probably get 1 back a battle round. So it's not too bad.
Yeah.
No, it's not too bad. I mean, if you look at it like that in terms of you potentially getting 5 CP, that is pretty good, especially when there are normally stratagems that allow you to buy an extra warlord trait. So if you can have this as a secondary warlord trait, and you're gonna get 5, but you spent 1, so you're getting 4 extra CP, then it's a good secondary warlord trait, I would say.
Yeah, there's lots of good stratagems in the book as well, which you're going to want to use.
Can I ask, in 9th edition, and again, this is going to show that I haven't probably played as much of it as I would have done otherwise, or also that it's not really been in the army list that I've brought up to this point, but have they got rid of that 1 CP per battle round cap, or is that still in effect?
No,
I think Harlequins specifically break it with something. They have one of their White Dwarf rules says they can specifically ignore it. But I'm not sure who
Yeah,
else
yeah.
can.
I think
and Inquisition have special abilities where if you spend a stratagem that gains you CP, that's in addition to the one per battle round.
Yeah, because the assassins get that as well, don't they? If an assassin kills a warlord, they get 2 CP.
Yeah, like you spend 1, but you get 2.
I know you spend 0 now. That used to be you spend 1, but now it doesn't cost you anything. It's one of those 0 CP things, which but yeah, because it used to be it cost you 1 and you got 3, whereas they obviously went, well, that's a bit dumb. We'll just make it cost 0, and then you get 2. And it's like, oh, it's quite nice. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, I think it's a strong warlord trait for sure. And then from a relic perspective, they have the Right of the Living Muse, which all sounds very exciting. So Cabals of the Blackheart Archon models only. The bearer has the following ability. Right of the Living Muse. It's an aura ability. While a friendly Cabal of the Blackheart core unit is within 6 of the bearer, each time models in that unit make an attack, re-roll a wound roll of 1. If the bearer is a Real Space Raider unit, this ability also affects Blade for Hire units. So again, crazy strong, because this guy is instinctively giving you reroll 1s anyway. So having reroll 1s to hit and then reroll 1s to wound, I mean, yeah,
This is really strong. So the previous iteration was you used to see a Blackheart Archon sit at the back of the field with 3 Ravagers with Disintegrators, and they'd reroll 1s to hit, reroll 1s to wound. They're not core anymore, so you can't do that. That's not to say Ravagers are dead, but this opens up even more combos. So it's worth pointing out that this works on Blades for High units in Real Space Raider detachments. So this now works on your Incubi. So if you're running into combat with Incubi, who everyone's seen the data sheet, which has been out for months, they hit like a freight train, and all of a sudden they reroll 1s to hit and 1s to wound. And works on other mercenaries. So Scourges with blasters can drop down 6 inches away from you and reroll to hit, reroll to wound the 1s. Like, there's lots and lots of play, and it's, again, Blackheart was strong, maybe because it's the most powerful Cabal in the lore. Whether it should remain as strong, it's very versatile. You'll see the Living Muse quite a lot, but there's other good relics. It depends if you want your Archon to be more of a force multiplier, or whether you want to actually go see some action, because Archons can be a lot more deadlier, especially when we spoke about earlier that you can make them fight again once per battle, which is really good. So really strong Cabal, and you probably will take this Cabal.
Almost certainly. But if you weren't going to take that Cabal, which would you say is the next contender? We won't go through every one of them because that'll take way too long. But what would you say would be your second pick?
So second pick would be Poison Tongue, which is Malice's obsession. So their obsession, like I said earlier, is +1 to poison weapons. So all your splinter rifles, splinter cannons, agonizers get +1. Really good. They actually get a bonus now where if you kill models with a poison weapon, then you subtract 1 from combat attrition tests taken by that unit, which is really good. And their stratagem is really good as well, where you get to redeploy 3 units at the start of the first battle round. So if you know you're going first and you got 3 units of Incubi in Raiders, and all of a sudden you just frontline them and run them off into the distance. So it's still good. Their relic is so. Their warlord trait is so. And obviously there's other generic ones which you can replace with, but they're definitely second to Blackheart.
I mean, the ability to redeploy up to 3 units. I've used. Yeah, it's incredible. I've used that so much with my Craftworld Aeldari. It's won me so many games. Again, can feel a little bit like a gotcha mechanic in some regards, but I mean, again, in certain contexts, I feel like that's fair enough. But yeah, and the abilities that you've stated there in terms of increasing poison weapons power, and then obviously impacting combat attrition. I mean, yeah, I easily understand why you would suggest this is the sort of second strongest. Again, maybe not as versatile, but interesting to see for sure.
If I went whistle stop tour through the others, Cabal the Flayed Skull has had a massive fall from grace, where You used to get splinter weaponry, used to reroll ones with like the guys inside and the venom itself.
Yeah.
Doesn't work anymore. They get a bit of extra movements there, fly, and they can ignore light cover, but they've taken a bit of a fall from grace when the other cabals have just stepped up their game. So again, the other stuff, the Warlord trait, relic, and stratagem are decent. Obsidian Rays, however, without going into too much detail, so there's still the Obsession, which gives you 6 inches to range of assault, rapid fire, and heavy weapons. But actually, they almost get like the reverse of Blackheart. So because they're flawless workmanship, you get to reroll to wounds once per unit per phase, which is actually really decent. And I think there's definitely some play with Trueborn because your blasters are going to 24-inch range, and you're making sure that that Dark Lance is wounding. So there's definitely some play in there. And then the custom obsessions, there's quite a few, and someone's probably going to find out a combo, but at the moment, the good ones from Phoenix Rising have been watered down a bit. And the standout one is Dark Mirth, which is an aura. And while within 12 inches of this unit, each time an enemy unit is selected to make a normal move, advance, fallback, or a selected charge, roll 1d6 on a 5+, that enemy unit suffers 1 mortal wound, which is a nice sort of troll ability, but you're probably not going to see those other cabals.
Yeah, I can't see that. I mean, when I read the other cabals, it was like, yeah, I agree with you that there's some interesting stuff in there, but none of it adds up to what you get by taking Black Hearts or Poison Tongue, for example. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense that it should be that way, though, in some respects. But yeah, interesting. So yeah, let's talk about the witch cults. So I suppose actually one of the interesting things about the witch cults from the outset that we probably should acknowledge is the Warzone Book of Rust, because there's a witch cult in that, isn't there?
There is. Cult of Strife have a Codex supplement in the Book of Rust, and they're really, really good. Really good.
Are they really good without their supplement, or do they need the supplement to be good? What are they baseline, and then what does the supplement add without going into crazy amounts of detail? Because we don't want to be here forever on that one. But
so they're very good. If I go through Strife really quickly, they've had a change. So before they used to be +1 attack on the charge or heroic, that has basically become a combat drug now. They get always fight first, which is a very good rule to have. And also they get +1 to charge if the unit they're charging isn't already engaged. So again, that's a nice rule. They get to keep their fight twice stratagem. However, that only works on witches now. And their Warlord trait, Blood Dance, is still pretty decent, where you generate extra attacks. File Bouquet is reasonable, where you get to add random combat drugs. So Witch Cult of Strife look decent, but the supplement is where it takes it off to another world of pain, where they get access to new relics, new Warlord traits, and new stratagems. And some of the stratagems are key. They are really what tips it over the edge for me. So I'm not going to go through every single one. Take you through, again, you're saying a whistle stop tour. But if I told you, Dan, that you had a unit of witches and you wanted to make it into combat, what do witches not like when they charge into combat?
I mean, I would hazard a guess that I wouldn't like being shot at.
Yes. So if I could tell you that for 1 CP, you just flawless approach, ignore Overwatch, and they can't set to defend or hold steady either. So that's just really good. It's really good. Bearing in mind,
that's absurd.
Yeah. And bearing in mind that your base strat is fight again, which is really good, especially on a unit of 20 witches. And then you add Art of the Kill, which means you can, every time you make a melee attack, you reroll the wound, which is really good. And then
if this was a 10-man unit of the old Blood Brides or whatever it was called, sorry, I've forgotten what they were actually called now, the elite witches.
Yeah,
that's pretty amazing, isn't it?
What's also quite interesting is you can reroll the wound roll. So it's not about successful or unsuccessful. So for whatever reason, say you're fishing for those -4 APs, you can reroll, which is, could be quite useful. Dance of Death for 1 CP, pretend you're Harlequins. When you move, advance, or charge, you basically just move horizontally over models and terrain as though they're not there, which is just
Incredible.
really, really good. There's another one which is fantastic when basically you kill a unit in combat, you then get a 4-up invuln to your next phase. So it's the nightmare, right, where your beefy unit of witches goes through something and you sit around in the open and you get shot. Whereas now, all of a sudden, you get a 4-up invuln out in the open, which is great. Deadly Exemplars, 1 CP. Succubus kills a character or monster in combat. Then Brides of Death is applicable to all of your Cult of Strife units for the rest of the game, which is phenomenal.
Wow.
So all of your strifes roll 1s to wound. Really good. And there's a really nice flavoursome stratagem called Hecatrix of the Crucible, where you can choose 1 Hecatrix, which is the sergeant, in your army, and they can have a relic. And there's some really tasty relics, and the relic that you're going to want to choose is Morvaine's Agonizer, which means that if you hit something which is not a vehicle or monster, they can't fall back, so they just trap them. So you don't really shard it in a payload, you just hit some of the Agonizer and they're just staying there. They're locked in combat with you. Really
I
good.
assume the stratagem for escaping still applies, though, right? You can still use that to get out of there. Is it Desperate Breakout, or whatever it's called? Oh no, that Desperate Breakout's for getting out of transports, but whatever it's called, you know, the thing where you can leave combat.
Yeah, well, this just says until the start of your next turn, that enemy unit cannot fall back. So I assume you can't fall back. So you're trapped.
I mean, that seems reasonable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember if that stratagem is you still doing a fullback move or if it's just a move.
Yeah, because I think the way the stratagem works is it was intended and made to prevent you from being pinned down, right? So like the idea is that people before would try point a model and then it couldn't leave combat because it was wrapped.
Yeah, I think it might still be. Yeah, it depends whether it's a fullback move or not.
I see Paulie looking at his cards. What
Got
are you
my
going to tell
cards
us, mate?
out. No, I'm playing some Gin Rummy. No, I've got the obviously the Desperate Breakout Core Stratagem card, and this talks about falling back. It's not about anything which interacts with it. So I'd assume this Agonizer would trap you, which is pretty good.
That's very strong.
And there's some other relics, and there's one particular one called Dark Lotus Toxin. And we're going to talk about some relics a bit later when we talk about Succubi, because there are some other really good options with Cult of Strife in this book.
I mean, obviously there was a lot of controversy around the interwebs around the release of the Book of Rust and the fact that you needed to have it in order to access all your rules, as people said it. I mean, how do we feel as a group about Games Workshop's release strategy around the Book of Rust? I mean, me personally, kicking it off, when they announced this, I was really underwhelmed by it. I was very much like, oh god, this is just going to be some terrible book of Crusade rules or some campaign stuff that's not going to really matter. And you know, since then, obviously, it's been released, and I did purchase it. I got it from Element Games for £28 or whatever it was, because I think that it retails at £35 normally. Phil's nodding at me, so
I think so.
Yeah, so I mean, and that feels like a lot for what it is. It's not a lot of content for £35. I mean, it's possibly less content than some supplements, right? So, or like, you know, like I feel like it's about the same size, if not smaller, than the Dark Angel supplement. So that felt a little bit of a letdown in terms of content per pound, as it were, or per penny. But part of that, I mean, look, I don't mind the idea that Games Workshop are putting new experimental or, you know, flavoursome rules into, you know, these supplement books. And I don't mind the idea that they're releasing them in these kind of compendiums around campaigns. But I do understand why people would be annoyed that they have to buy a bunch of Death Guard and Mechanicus rules that they don't care about in order to access the Drukhari stuff. So I can sympathize with that, but broadly speaking, I don't think it's that bad. It's like, cool, I'm getting a bunch of extra rules that are optional, admittedly. I mean, as you've alluded to or indicated, Paulie, they are super strong, so it makes sense that you're going to run them. But ultimately, like, I don't know, I'm not that down on it versus some other people, but I do understand where they're coming from. But it does seem expensive versus other books for sure. But yeah, I don't know. I can't hate it. I don't know where are you at with this, Paul? You're the Drukhari man. Are you hurt?
I'm not like all my friends know that if anything comes out as Drukhari, I buy it, right? So yeah, I bought it, and it's not 4 pages, it's 3 pages. You know, there's some art in there as well. But it's the first time Drukhari have actually been in a campaign book. Like, we never got to take part in Vigilus and all the other ones in 7th edition. The closest thing we ever got to was Valador, which we had some apocalypse attachments in it. So
weren't they in an old 6th edition campaign book with a Hellbrute on the cover? It was called like Fire something or other.
Our Crusade of Fire. So that was we're in there actually, and
yeah. But
that was a sort of narrative, weird sort of book. Not like traditional sort of campaign books like this.
Yeah.
But is it day one DLC? Well, like, yeah, it technically is, but obviously everyone's very quick to forget there's a big global pandemic, right? And it's obvious that nothing is getting released when it's intended to. That the Drukhari book probably was due out months ago. Like, even in the pandemic, it's due out in January. So if there's no pandemic, you probably have to assume it is out sometime between September, October, November. But my theory is potentially this campaign book is on time. So maybe there's supposed to be 6 months in between them. Maybe they were always going to be close together, but you'll never know. And it's a case of it's really up to you. And also, if you've been collecting Drukhari for a little bit of time, you'll remember we had day one DLC for the 2014 book. We had Codex Homunculus Covens, so actually we should be used to day one DLC, and it's extra flavor, it's extra background. And if you're buying a campaign book for 3 rules, you're not getting enough out of the book. Like, it's there for everyone. So I think it's cool. I think it's nice. And hopefully we get to see, more Codex supplements in the future. I think for me, this sets like a really nice sort of precedent that we've had Drazar redone with his Incubi. We've had Lilith redone. So whether we'll see Urin Rakarth come with Prophets of Flesh in the future, hopefully with Grotesques, but I have to wait and see.
Yeah, man. I think what's interesting as well, though, right, and the thing not to overlook is, okay, fair enough, the timing with Drukhari is what it is, but the Death Guard are in there too, right? So, like, no one's necessarily grumbling about, oh, well, if I want to use these Death Guard rules, I have to buy this book because, oh, the Death Guard, for some reason, were already a content-complete book before this came along. Well, clearly that isn't the case. And what's extra interesting is, I think early on, people got really confused and started saying, oh, yeah, this is even extra rules for Imperial Knights and for AdMech. But actually, as it's transpired, the AdMech are coming out in April. So this isn't day one DLC for the AdMech. This is the DLC has come out before the main book, as it were. So it's literally like day -20 for the AdMech. And it's reasonable to assert, and again, obviously, I have no idea about this, but it's reasonable to assert that Imperial Knights can't be that far behind because every single faction in this book has now got a codex or is about to have a codex drop pretty soon. So I would assume that Imperial Knights will follow AdMech in April because of this book, right? Because using this book for Imperial Knights is really weird because it introduces a bunch of new like weapon profiles and things that aren't relevant to the actual book. So, like, for example, you can update your thermal cannon, and your thermal cannon more resembles melter weapons as they are in other books right now. So it's real weird upgrades and things that change. I mean, it is still universally compatible with current Imperial Knights, but it does feel like this was something that will be added to the potentially upcoming Imperial Knights, but definitely the upcoming Mechanicus, who are going to always have all these extra Metallica rules, which is interesting. So I don't know. And I was saying to Phil, though, right, not to bring this back to Krieg stuff again, though, but I think this is quite promising because if they're going to do these sorts of smaller but ultimately kind of compendium releases for lots of different armies, this could potentially offer an opportunity for something like the Krieg to get some supplement rules, right?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, I don't know if I'd enjoy that or not. It's
take even more units away, Phil.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, to go from the Forge World stuff to probably potentially an even smaller thing from a supplement. I don't know. It could be good. I think it's a fair release though. I don't have a problem with it myself. I've always said so long as it's not taking stuff out of a codex and that is a kind of sort of unique thing and it is a supplement of sorts where it's not units. It's not like Psychic Awakening where you know if you want to run your new AdMech units, you got to buy this book. It's not like that at all. It's you can run an army in a thematic way because there are restrictions on all of those army lists. So it's not something that you would just bolt on to your existing army. It forces you to play an army in a certain way. So if you don't want to play it that way, you don't have to get it. But as you said, it's pretty expensive for what it is. It's a bit like Vigilus, but I think Vigilus was a bit more of an easy buy for everyone because it had almost every army catered for. But again, probably only 1 or 2 pages for most armies in a way that this is. So I understand why some people might not be happy and others are totally fine with it. Personally, I'm fine with it.
The campaign system in it as well isn't actually that bad. I mean, I haven't read it in great detail, but the campaign system actually looks quite interesting. It's got some fun missions in it. It's got some interesting stuff there. So, yeah. Paulie, you were going to say something, mate. Sorry to cut you off on that one.
No, that's what I was going to say. Drukhari players are notoriously passionate. I think anyone who sort of follows Drukhari has been through some ups and downs, whether it's been waiting 12 years for a codex release or playing Drukhari 3, 6, and 7th edition and just getting battered. They're very, very protective of their army. And I think anything where it's like they feel like there's a slight against them by Games Workshop, then they just rally and they scream and screech at times. But having said, the passionate fans are also some of the most awesome fans. And they really sort of get behind the army as well. So, but they do like to make their voices known, whether they're happy or sad. And sometimes I think they're quite sad about the alleged Day 1 DLC.
Well, yeah, that's fair enough. And I understand that obviously they're coming off the back of having a very poor Psychic Awakening, but then maybe that was indicative of the fact that they were always envisioned to be a pretty early release in 9th edition. I mean, me and Phil saw the early material for 9th edition delivered for like pre-order incentives, the rest of it. And I think the original published release date was it May, Phil, that they were targeting?
It was a good month or 2 before it actually did come out.
Yeah. So you can tell that their release schedule had been mucked up in the same way like Necrons didn't get any love in Psychic Awakening because obviously they, were coming out with a new with a new book. I mean, Harlequins, I felt like I don't kind of understand what happened to the Harlequins. I feel like they just kind of forgot about them.
Yeah.
Here's a white dwarf. Sorry about that.
They're 4 kits, right? They're not an army, are they?
Well, I mean, clearly not. I mean, I don't know. I do like Harlequins. But anyway, there you go. So of the other 2, witch cults, you told me before that they're quite similar in terms of power rating, but obviously the Cult of Strife kind of breaks away because 1, they've got access to a special character, but 2 in Lilith, but then 2, they've got the access to the additional rules in the Book of Rust. But if you take them as read here in the pages of the Drukhari Codex, I mean, yeah, is there any sort of standout stuff you want to talk about with the other witch cults? I
think the 3 sort of main obsessions, they're all relatively equal. They all have their own perks. They all have their own sort of builds, succubi. So Cursed Blade, which was my favorite cult that I used to run in the last edition, last codex. They added +1 strength to their witches, which is great. So you have strength 4 witches off the bat, give them Grave Lotus, combat drugs, and all of a sudden they're strength 5, and they're punching things really hard. But they had a big change to their second bullet point. So before, they used to have a rule where you'd only ever lose 1 model to morale, which was great for witch bombs. But that's changed now. That's gone. But instead, you get their old warlord trait, which is every time you make an unmodified saving throw of a 6 in combat, you inflict a mortal wound against the enemy. So that is really strong, really strong, really good. And they're all about sort of dealing sort of damage to people. So their relic is Traitor's Embrace, which is fantastic, where you essentially you kill the succubus and a skeleton explodes and like metal rods fly out into you. So basically, when she dies in combat, on a 2-up, she does D3 plus 3 mortal wounds. Like
Wow.
they're really good. They're not tough, as it were, but when you kill them, they're gonna hurt you back as well. Really good. And Red Grief, which was really, really popular for people that like Reavers, because obviously Red Grief before was the way to unlock advance and charge, whereas now they have reroll charge rolls, which is really good considering Drukhari actually lost that for the most part army wide, and they add 2 to their advance rolls. And they are really strong. Their stratagem is still the one way you can consolidate into vehicles, but actually their relic, the Bloodglaive, had a really nice sort of glow up, whereas before it was +3 strength, it's now +2 strength. It's still -3 AP, but it went from damage D3 to damage 3 as an archaic glaive, and that's really strong. And there's other warlord traits and ways to sort of pimp this and make this deal lots of damage. So I think you're going to see all 3 cults, but you will see Cult of Strife the most, and that's mainly down to the stratagems. There is a few sort of prerequisites with Cult of Strife where you have to have a Cult of Strife detachment to get access to the stratagems, and a Real Space Raid's attachment is not a Cult of Strife detachment, so you might see it bolted onto Real Space Raid. You might see multiple cults. They're all viable. I'd probably say the build a bear sort of ones for witch cults aren't that good. A lot of them from Phoenix Rising, which were good, changed a lot. So acrobatic display was a 3-up invuln in combat, which is really strong, and that's now changed to when you consolidate, you can move like horizontally over models, which is a bit meh. Test of skill was a big hit before, where you got +1 to wound against stuff which had a wound characteristic of 10 or more. So that was great for your Void Ravens and Razor Wings, whereas it's now moved to melee only. So again, there's some combos, and over time, people might look to pick in there, but the main 3 are the best, and Strife probably wins, mainly due to the stratagems. And we haven't spoken about the relics and warlord trait combinations, but Strife's probably the way you're going to go.
Yeah. I mean, how would acrobatic display even work necessarily, right? Because like when you're making those consolidation or pile in moves, technically you have to get closer to models, but then what does that mean when you can then go over them?
I don't know. I guess isn't it where you as long as you end it closer, is that how power winds work? Would you always have to go closer?
I think so, but again, it just starts to get really messy because technically you have to be able to end closer, and then I don't know, it just sort of it feels like a really weirdly worded rule that doesn't necessarily have any practical application. So I'd be interested to see how people interpret that, assuming they ever use it, which I think it's fair to assert they won't.
Yeah, it's a shame. And some of these are nice, but the Red Grief, the Curse Space Strife, they're nicer. They're quite simple.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, man. And then in the Homunculus Coven realm, is it still a 1-horse race? Are you going Prophets of Flesh or Bust, or is it literally similar to the Witch Cults that there's some, there is some potential options here?
Do you know what? There's some changes. So Prophets of Flesh now have changed a lot. So before they said the 4-up invuln, which obviously that's gone because the army-wide rules have changed. Their stratagem just disappeared. Black Cornucopians went. That used to be like a teleporting rule. That's been replaced. Spectator Mask is still there, but the aura has shrunk down to 3 inches. Diabolical Soothsayer is different. That used to give you D3 command points. It now allows you to add 1 to your toughness or wounds, or 1 to your movement attacks, which is kind of nice. But their main rule now is at the start of your command phase, each character, grotesque, or monster regains 1 lost wound, which is pretty nice. And the other one is if you are each time you're hit by an attack which has a strength characteristic of 8 or more, an unmodified wound roll of 1 to 3 of that for that attack always fails, irrespective of any abilities. Oh, sorry, it's not against strength 8. So if it's strength 7 or under, you can only ever be wounded on a 4-up, not a 1, 2, or 3. So it's okay. Prophets is still relatively durable, but they're not the powerhouse. Where I think, you sort of Cabal the Black Heart really kept their crown, but their crown is slipping.
Yeah.
And then you go to the Dark Creed. Did you ever hear of anyone running Dark Creed with the last Codex?
I've never even heard of Dark Creed. What are they?
They are, so the Covenant of the Dark Creed has perfected every method of inducing fear, and their mere presence fills the mind with nightmarish dread. So
they're in yellow armor. Who could ever be scared of someone wearing yellow?
No one. They just spilt mustard down themselves, haven't they?
Yeah.
But they're cool. So their aura is, while an enemy unit is within 6 inches of them, subtract 1 from leadership characteristics of models in that unit, and subtract 1 from combat attrition tests for the unit. There's lots of ways to leadership attacks with this army. Phantasm grenade launchers have massively changed, where it's effectively you roll 3d6. If you beat someone's leadership, you do a mortal wound. And most units can have Phantasm grenade launchers, and you're going to see them spammed everywhere, which is pretty decent for 5 points. And each time you make a melee attack for a unit with this obsession that targets a unit of leadership characteristic that's equal to or lower than that attacking unit's leadership characteristic, add 1 to that hit roll. So it's pretty good, but where they really excel is the Warlord trait, Fear Incarnate. And you're going to see people run this coven purely for this Warlord trait. So at the end of your movement phase, you can select 1 enemy unit within 9 inches of this Warlord and roll 3d6. If the result is greater than the enemy unit's leadership characteristic until the start of your next movement phase, that enemy unit cannot perform actions and it loses the objective secured ability. Now, this ability could potentially be game winning in certain scenarios, and I think you're going to see this homunculus a lot, and you're going to see this obsession a lot as well.
It's also incredible because you don't need line of sight, right? Like, it's literally you just got to be within 9 of them, which is very strong if you don't need to see the guys. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty massive. And then I assume, obviously, if you were performing an action, so if you are performing an action, you immediately fail that action.
Yeah, so
wow,
good against banners, things like that.
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, banners triggers at the end of your turn, I think, but then you get rewarded for it in your following turn, assuming that someone hasn't taken that objective off you, which if you lose OBSEC, they're very likely to. So yeah, that's still pretty strong. Man, yeah, that sounds really intimidating. I mean, I like a lot of things that kind of muck around with the leadership characteristics. The problem is, though, is that I don't know with the way the leadership system is these days, whether that's massively meaningful or not anymore. But certainly the Warlord trait is big, right? Like that's going to definitely create
you will see that homunculus out and about.
Oh yeah, without a doubt, right? Because I mean, again, it's got so much utility to it, and you're going to obviously have these guys in your real space raid, right? I mean, you can still gain access to this Warlord trait as part of a real space raid, right?
Yeah, it's just locked to Dark Creed.
Incredible.
Yeah,
but also you don't need the real space raid because most armies are going to have potentially 3 patrols, 1 of each of the types. So you can take this as 1 of your 3. So the thing that Drukhari get is effectively it's like taking a Space Marine army with 3 chapters, and you get to pick each sort of set. So it's loads of sort of combinations that they can take.
It is interesting, man, because that was always something that always felt like when the 8th edition book dropped, that was so much of the flavor of the army, and a lot of people were like, "Well, it doesn't work," because I think the thing is with the old Real Space Raid, which was the 3 patrols, they very quickly updated how much CP you got and then forgot to include the Real Space Raid in it. And it sort of didn't feel as valuable anymore because I think it only gave you 2 CP if you took it, which a lot of people were like, and then also it had the whole problem of how you ran it in tournaments because everyone had like a free detachment restriction, which again, I think the Real Space Raid does a job towards working around. But yeah. No, super cool, man. And then, the Coven of the 12. Anything worth talking about for those red fellas?
So, apart from their color scheme probably being the coolest, they were very famous for being able to snipe units. You used to be able to use Tantalus and play the stratagem and snipe them. And so this one still works similar. So use this stratagem after a coven of 12 homunculus unit from your army consolidates. Select one enemy character model excluding vehicle monster units that is within engagement range as homunculus and roll 1d6. On a 2 to 5, that model suffers D3 mortal wounds. On a 6, that model suffers D3 plus 3 mortal wounds. So it doesn't work similar. It's very, very different in that sense. So it's decent. There's like, shenanigans you can have. Their main obsession is you improve their AP by 1, and they can still fight with ranged weapons and still perform actions. They're pretty good. They've probably got multiple hands doing different things. So they're decent. They're good. But compared to Cabals and Witch Cults, you're going to see a lot of play in the custom covens. The most notable two is Artist of the Flesh, which is an all-consuming one, which means you can't pair it with another type. And this is, each time an attack is allocated to model this obsession, excluding vehicles, subtract 1 from the damage characteristic of that attack, which is
that's huge.
Really good. That's really big.
I've played against Richie's Dreadnought army enough times to know that subtracting 1 from damage on big gribbly things is very, very annoying. So the idea of a horde of Taloses with -1 to damage is nothing short of terrifying.
And then we're going to get to obviously giving Dom a shout out to Dark Technomancers, which probably was it was by far the biggest hit of Phoenix Rising. So Dark Techno took Comora by storm, and what happened was you overpowered your weapons and you added +1 to wound and +1 damage, and if you rolled a 1 to hit on each weapon, you take a mortal wound. So it's really useful. But then you'd have what we call suicide racks, so there's running with liquefiers, flame stuff, they kill themselves, but you'll be doing sort of damage 2 stuff. The way it's changed now is it works very similar. But instead of being on the wound roll, instead of the wound roll of a 1, it's now on the hit roll, which can't be re-rolled. And then if you make the wound rolls of a 1, you take 1 mortal wound. But if you're a vehicle or a monster, you suffer D3 mortal wounds. So on Talos, it's kind of dead. Venom spam with Dark Technomancers is completely dead. But where this is big now is liquefiers. So liquefiers got a buff. They're now range 12, strength 4, -2, 1 damage. But all of a sudden, because they don't roll to hit, they become even better with Dark Technomancers. So you're now in a unit of 5 racks. You've got 2d6 liquefiers at 12 inches. They're strength 4, but +1 to wound. So against most targets out there, they're probably winning it on 4s. And then they're -2 and they're 2 damage as well. So this is going to just slaughter Marines. It's going to slaughter anything which is damage 2. And I think Dom's thoughts are this is just replacing disintegrators. It's a really, really reliable way to get damage 2. And at the moment, me personally, I'm probably building for Dark Technomancers for my Drukhari. Really powerful. So a lot of good options for.
That makes sense. Yeah, no, that's cool to hear though, man, and that's good that they've added that flavor to it for sure. And I think that's the thing though, isn't it? Everything in this book is just covered in options, and I think that's one of the most incredible things about the current lineup of Games Workshop 40k codexes is that every one of these is offering us so many creative ways to build and field our armies, and I think that's what we've always kind of wanted as players, but it's so well realized here. And inadvertently, what they've actually done as well is they've created a system whereby they have effectively done away with some of the old soup mechanics that were definitely doing the rounds over the last, last 3 editions, right? I mean, I always remember going into the Games Workshop store in Windsor, Paulie, where I think Steve was the manager at the time, good old Steve. And he said to me, he was like, oh, 6th edition's coming out. And good news, allies. And I remember saying to him, immediately, that sounds terrible, mate. There's no way Games Workshop is going to balance an allies system in 40k. And how right I was,
Sure, I was really looking forward to it, right? I was really naive. I went to the midnight launch and I queued up for my rule book or my box, whatever I got. And I was like, do you know what? And obviously at the time I was, mono Drukhari. And I was like, do you know, I really, really like the idea of just some like Eldar outcasts, some rangers like allied into my army with like the Sky Serpents Corsairs. I was like, that's gonna be really fluffy. And no, I picked up a box of Finecast Rangers, and I was like, I'm really looking forward to doing this. And then how wrong was I? How wrong was I that it was just gonna I know, me personally, I guess without going off a massive tangent, I felt it was the worst 40k had been, and Super and Allies just really made the game very abstract. And I think at times Super's good, but especially with all the nonsense in 7th edition. I know you guys have done a episode recently, haven't you, about different editions, but 7th edition.
Yeah, well, 7th really, predominantly.
Yeah, it was, especially as a Dark Elder player, it was not a good time to be alive, I can tell you that.
Well, yeah, I mean, as Drukhari, it was rough going, or Dark Elder as it was back then for sure. I think that was the thing. I mean, overall, our consensus on 7th edition is that we felt like it was a really strong addition as it concerns the core rule set, as was evident from games like Horus Heresy. But obviously, the rule set is not in isolation. The codexes and all the formations and detachments just bloated it beyond recognition. And that was the thing, not to go off on too big a tangent with it, but, you know, you and I, Paulie, were frequenting the same Windsor store back when 6th edition came out. And, you know, one of the guys who was a regular in the store, literally within the first week of it being released, was like, look, here's my Space Wolves with Imperial Guard army. Yay! And it's like, cool, there's 100 guardsmen with They Shall Know No Fear. Yeah, this is fun.
He's a fun guy to play, wasn't he?
He's the best. I do like Tom, to be fair, on a personal level.
He's actually a very nice guy.
He is. You wouldn't know it by the way he plays 40k. But
yeah, he was a meta chaser, to be fair. But again, a nice guy.
Yeah. Exactly, but you need those in like store or like gaming groups, right? You want someone who is doing that because it's fun to try and surpass them, or to try and keep pace with them, or try and, you know, get past them, right?
That's it. And sometimes it's good to be able to test your competitive mettle. And sometimes you want you want to test out a tournament list, and you want to go play against someone, and not a legend that he would ever pull weird things on you. He just pull ridiculous sort of meta lists at the time. But you want someone that is going to take it very seriously and competitively. And I think a lot of stores have like people that you'd call like a captain tournament, where they think they're very good at the game, but if they went to something like a GT or face some of the better players out there, they wouldn't do that well. But in their own little meta, they are the big fish. But sometimes you get constrained by your meta, and you have to make do with the people that you can play with.
Yeah. But also, I think that's one of the best ways of improving, right? Is just consistently playing different people, and being part of those clubs or stores is a good way of achieving that, even if it can be restrictive within Games Workshop stores these days. But yeah, if you're going to play, it's good to have a group to get involved with. I always credit that as the best way of approaching the game. Like, I always went to lots of different clubs and stores and things, and played lots of different games with lots of different people, and that's how I got good. Not that I'm good at 9th edition right now. I'm ready for my rude awakening when I go to my first 9th edition tournament. I get my ass handed to me, because I am literally, I can't imagine I'm any good at 9th edition right now.
It's such a different edition, and I played a few tournaments, sort of in summer when lockdown had lifted slightly, and it was, I really enjoyed it. I love the new edition, but trying to get my head around it. And I think all the people out there that have spent all of lockdown playing 40k on Tabletop Simulator are going to have like a big competitive advantage, especially all those people that live on their own and form bubbles of other people and be able to sort of play safely. They have advantage, but I think as soon as we're back at events, I'm sure that the rustiness will go away and everyone's going to learn the new edition. So really excited for that. Really excited.
I mean, I was terrible at 8th edition when it launched, right? Like, I was losing games of 8th all the time when it first came out, because I was so stuck in my ways with the older versions. But yeah, I figured it out. Who would have thought? Just take loads of flyers. Hey, winning. Because I'm a pro. That's how it is. But yeah, That was the good days, wasn't it? Right, early 8th when it was all indexes, the glory years.
As good as it is a simple time, probably not the early bit, not when you had like 7 storm ravens and flying hive tyrants roaming around, but it was a nice time. But then it got awkward because then Codex started coming out. It's a case of I got more stratagems than you, and it got a bit hard.
That was when the Guard were good. The good old period of time when the 2 best armies were Chaos Space Marines and Imperial Guard. I mean, imagine that.
Yeah.
Can't even fathom that world anymore. Like flipping
me,
Chaos
like,
Space Marines.
8th and 9th edition are really strong editions. I love the meta. I love what they're doing. And I think, from what I understand, like they were saying, when 8th edition came out, all the armies are going to feel like they should on the battlefield. And especially this codex now, this is the closest they've ever got to like how it should feel to have a Drukhari army. There's probably some flavor missing here and there, not to like put too a negative spin on it. There's a few units we'll get into later where perhaps because they were powerful before, they didn't know how to sort of really update them to new codex. But I think if you took this codex, added in the missing special characters from 2010 and a little bit of flavor from the 98 codex, you'd have the perfect Drukhari codex. But they're not too far away. Not too far away.
So on that topic and trying to kind of move things along smoothly, like there's a lot of stuff that we can also talk about, but I'm conscious of time, and I think people can go to lots of different places to get breakdowns of warlord traits and chapter approved mission rules and stratagems in detail, right? Like we're not gonna sit here and go through everything in tedious detail. I think what would make sense for us now to kind of put a nice bow on this whole thing is to start going through some units, picking out stuff that we like, starting to talk about combinations and starting to talk about things that are just interesting. So more of a general chat about stuff in the book that's kind of fun and kind of interesting. So the way we normally approach this, Wally, is we tend to pick out some units. So myself and Phil will normally do this back and forth, but obviously with you here, we'll get you involved in it as well. So, I think, maybe as our knowledgeable Drukhari playing fella, it might be fun to hear Phil's thoughts on a unit out of the starting blocks. I mean, Phil, is there anyone in particular that you want to pick and talk about that intrigues you?
Yeah, there's a couple. Let me go and look through the book and find it.
Thumb through the pages of the definitely not series of photos that I sent you.
How dare you? We're going to talk about Hellions.
Hellions, I hear them. They're good now, aren't they?
I like the fact that I've played against many Dark Elder player, Drukhari player, and I've never seen these on the tabletop once. So I'm hoping we see them now.
I think there was a time where there were some Hellions doing the rounds, but they were usually just Beastmasters, like back in the day. Like that was like literally the only flavor of Hellion you ever saw. But yeah, Phil, what is a Hellion then? Take us through.
Well, Hellion, you get 4 to 19 of them. They have movement 14, weapon skill, and ballistic skill of 3+, strength 3, toughness 4, 2 wounds, 3 attacks, leadership 7, and a 5+ save. And a Heliarch, you get one of them, who's obviously the leader. Similar profile, he gets +1 attack, +1 leadership.
So attacks 4, leadership 8.
Yes, yeah, that's right. Yeah, you can have up to 20 of them in total. Every model is equipped with splinter pods and a hellglaive. So the splinter pods are range 18, assault 2, strength 2, AP 0, damage 1, and a poison 4+. And the hellglaive, melee weapon, +1 strength, -1 AP, and 2 damage. The Heliarch can be equipped with a Phantasm grenade launcher. I mean, that is a cool sounding name. That's Phantasm. I'm going to shoot ghosts at you. It's a range 18, assault D3. It's a blast weapon. Each time a unit is hit by this weapon, roll 2d6. If the result is higher than the leadership characteristic of that unit, it suffers 1 mortal wound. You've also got
When you said he was going to shoot ghosts at you, I couldn't help but think of that Randy Marsh meme where he's where he's standing in front of a computer and he's going like, "It's ectoplasm, it's ectoplasm." You know
I've
the
got
one.
no idea what you're on about.
You don't know
I
that
know
one.
what you mean. I know what you mean.
You know that one. For those who know, they know.
Yeah, you've also
He's firing ectoplasm.
brilliant.
That's the
You've
idea.
got the Heliarch's Hellglaive can be replaced with one of the following: Splinter Pistol and Sunclaw, or Splinter Pistol and Power Sword, or Splinter Pistol and one Agonizer. Is it worth going through any of those?
Nah, I reckon they're relatively generic things like agonizers, like power weapons that are also poisonous, so they're -3 and poison 4+. I mean, would you ever break from the Hellglaive? I mean, it seems like such a good weapon from the baseline that I probably wouldn't seek to swap it out under very many circumstances.
So Agonizer gains a bit of extra AP between the codexes. Sunclaw gained damage 2, so it's kind of on par with a Hellglaive, and you get to add the mortal wounds. The Sunclaw is really cool in the 2010 book, where you'll be able to sort of like latch onto a character and sort of drag it around the unit, which is really good.
Yeah.
When you fell back, you better drag them with you, which is a bit of a shame it didn't exist. Hellions are the bomb. You're going to see Hellions everywhere. Hellions are sold out in Games Workshop and every independent everywhere because they are phenomenal. Now, the big changes that happened to what Phil read out is they got +1 toughness, +1 wound, +1 attack. The Hellglaive's got additional AP, and they are just ridiculously good. Now, the other things that make them good is going through combat drugs really quickly. Combat drugs changed. So the combat drugs are the same as before, or the names are the same. Adrenalite is no longer +1 attack. It's now +1 attack on the charge or heroically intervening. But Splinter Mine change, where it's not just +1 leadership, it's +1 ballistic skill as well, which is quite good, especially for Reavers. But now you can choose your drugs as you like. So before you were limited to choose, but you'd have to cycle through the 6 and then start again. Whereas now, if you have 3 units of Reavers, you give them all +1 toughness, and you can give that unit of Witches +1 strength, that Succubus +1 attack. You can choose as you like. However, if you don't want to choose, you can roll just twice on the table randomly. You can never get duplicates, but you get 2 drugs. And you've got no control over it, but none of the drugs are that bad. So all Witch Cult units, especially Hellions, you're going to buff them really, really well. And to go into some really, really key stratagems for Hellions very quickly, Eviscerating Flyby had a really nice change. So what happened with this is...
Oh, that's the character sniping one, isn't it?
Yeah, it's where they basically fly around lopping off people's heads. Now, the big difference to this is you fly over anything, and then you roll a dice for every model in a unit. On a 5-up, you do mortal wounds.
And that's every model in your unit, not every model
so 20
in the enemy
Hellions,
unit.
Yeah, 20 Hellions, fly over a unit, you're on 20 dice. And if they're infantry, it's a 4+. And it's really good. It's really strong. It's similar to how it was before, but you can now just target stuff, and it's it's just great. Before you had to advance, now you can move or advance. You don't have to advance to do this, so it's just crazy good, crazy good.
Not that it matters if you advance, right? Because you're going to be advancing and charging anyway.
Yeah, I guess maybe splinter pods are assault, so I don't know, you wouldn't be able to fire your splinter pistol maybe. But yeah.
What a shame. Well, you couldn't do that anyway if you were firing your splinter pods, because you can't fire the pistol and the splinter pod
exactly.
Anyway.
So yeah, you're always going to be advanced
one or the other.
Hellions no matter what. They're very, very fast.
I mean, the thing that makes them... Well, I was going to say, like, just to say as well, because you didn't touch on it before we talk about the last stratagem or the other stratagems for them. The other thing that makes them ridiculous is the fact that they've got the holy combo of infantry and fly. I mean, the fact that these guys are riding around on massive hoverboards, yet somehow they're still infantry, sort of weirds me out. I guess like the idea is that they get off them now and again or something, or like
they're always on them.
I don't.
Like
so like, how did they end up being infantry?
Because they are infantry.
Well, yeah, it's like jump pack infantry. It's the same thing.
Yeah, but they're not. They're riding around on like a skateboard. Like, how is that infantry?
because it is like they're not
Because it is.
infantry. Put it that way.
Yeah. I'm with you. But that is so strong. I mean, that is the thing, because the fact they can interact with ruins and just phase shift through them. I mean, that is the key tenet of a strong unit and that's why I feel like these guys are stronger than the Reavers, because Reavers aren't infantry, whereas these guys are, and I think that's the edge, right? Yeah. That's the thing that. Oh yeah. Anyway, sorry, you were going to say about the other strategies,
and you're going to see this as well, and it's this is a generic witch cult one, but this is another example of like a glow up in the new codex where things have just got better. So Hyperstim Backlash. So beforehand, in the previous codex, you'd use this and the drug effect on your unit would be doubled, and then models in that unit would suffer mortal wounds and roll over 1. Whereas now, what happens is it still doubles them, which is great, but bearing in mind, all your units of random drugs, they have 2 lots of drugs, which will get doubled, and there's no negative to doing this. So it's just 2 CP. So say your Hellions have +1 toughness, +1 strength. All of a sudden, your Hellions for that phase, that battle round, are going to be strength toughness 6, because they're toughness 4 and then toughness 5, double toughness 6, and their hell goes to +1. It's just, there's some really good opportunities. And then it'll be a massive remiss if I didn't talk about one of the brand new stratagems for the Codex, which is 2 CP. And this is an example, again, of something which is really, really, really flavoursome, but also good in the game as well. And it's called Deadly Rivals. Now, it's 2 CP, and essentially what needs to happen is you have to have 1 unit of Reavers and 1 unit of Hellions, 12 inches apart, who can see each other until the end of the turn. But to both units, you add +1 to the movement characteristic, and they can all re-roll to hit in combat, which is really cool. It's like that that Helm's Deep moment, isn't it, with Gimli and Legolas, where they're competing to kill, and this is just, it's just so cool. They're battling each other without battling each other, if that makes sense. It's just they're competing.
Yeah.
Really good. And again, pretty much all of the strife stuff I spoke about earlier, a lot of those stratagems Hellions can use as well. They can use that fight again twice. They're just really good. Really good. And I think now that they're a bit tougher with more wounds, they're going to be hiding behind buildings. You're going to see these, and they're going to come kill your characters. They're going to come kill your Satan. They are really good. You're going to see them everywhere if you can buy them.
How many points are these guys these days?
17.
They're 18 or something.
17.
Wow.
Worth every penny. They have gone from being the worst unit in the Codex to one of the best, and it's great to see.
And I think, though, that should definitely reinforce players of other armies purchasing decisions while we're in this strange kind of middle period, right? Because it seems to be one of the most recurring things or themes of these books, right? Is that they are reevaluating and rebalancing seemingly throwaway units, and Hellions were definitely that, right? I mean, I got that Gangs of Kamaramara box set, and I was like, oh, it comes with Hellions. What am I going to do with them? They're still on the sprues in my garage. So yeah, maybe it's time to dust them off and actually, maybe just put them on eBay, right? It seems like they're in high demand at the moment. But all right, that's where they got to go. But because I mean that gives me a lot of reassurance about a lot of things, though, right? It makes me excited about the possibilities for Craftworlds in the future. Makes me excited about what they could potentially do with the Tau army, reevaluating things like I don't know, like stuff like Vespids, for example, that have never really had much attention. It's exciting. The most obvious one as well. Maybe we'll see Ogryns get some love in the future. That'd be nice, rather than every Ogryn having to be a Bullgryn. That'll be a nice change of pace to bring back some of those iconic guys. Because we've seen it with Terminators, right? Like, they're so much better now than they used to be. And
there's some people, they get upset when worse units become like the best units, become a lot better. But it's a case of people complain to Games Workshop and say this unit's rubbish, and then they reward them with good rules. And so it's just what happens. Like when I have a lot of Drukhari, I have most options, but I don't have everything painted. And when I knew this codex was coming out, I was like, I'm going to paint 10 Hellions, and I had no insider knowledge. I didn't know they're going to become good, but I didn't have them. And I was like, well, they haven't been really competitive since 2012. And I was like, probably assume that they might get sorted out by now. And they did. And I've got 10 painted Hellions ready to play in 2022, whenever it is we can.
There you go. So buck the trend, everybody. Gamble on those terrible units and see what they might become. I'm going to go out and buy some Rust Stalkers for my AdMech. Oh, I bet they're going to be good. All right, then. No one say anything. Fine. Don't worry. Right, moving on. I will pick a unit. Phil, are you satisfied that we've covered the Hellions in enough detail that satisfies your lust for Hellion-related information?
Yeah.
Beautiful, mate. That's always good to hear. For me, one of the more frequently used and enjoyed units within the ranks of the Drukhari, a unit that I really enjoyed. I used to have. Did I used to have metal versions of these? I feel like I did. I used to have metal versions of the Incubi, but I do think I had some metal mandrakes back in the day. I'm talking about mandrakes. They came in metal, didn't they, Paulie?
Well, yes, was the original ones came in bondage gear, didn't they, back in the day? But the current sort of shadow demons, yeah, they came in metal. They're quite sought after because they're quite prone to having breaking weapons. But definitely metal.
Yeah. But the old Mandrake rules were hilarious because you used to get one of them that was like a phantom, and then you used to move them around the board at an increased movement, and then you would be able to deep strike the unit somewhere where it had been.
Yeah, I think it was like
amazing.
3 models like moved around individually, and I think you would even know where they were, or you could choose where they went. And do you know what? I'm not going to lie. I actually hope that was going to come back because I thought it was quite a cool interaction. But mandrakes are interesting.
Yeah, it's a little bit too abstract, right? But I mean, the mandrakes have always been one of those units that I mean they're let down by the fact that there's not new sculpts for them, but at the same time, I don't think that's a huge issue. I think ultimately there is conversion potential within other ranges from AOS for these guys for sure. But the base miniatures themselves are absolutely gorgeous. So I can't see that being an issue anyway. I think they've got a lot of character. So the Mandrake is movement 8, which is super speedy from the outset. Weapon skill, ballistic skill 3, strength of 4+, or rather 4, sorry, not 4+. Strength of 4, which is pretty great. Toughness 3 because they are still elder. 1 wound, 3 attacks, leadership 7, and a 7+ save. But don't worry about that because obviously there are invuln saves for these guys. And then the Night Fiend is a additional attack and additional leadership, making him attacks 4 and leadership 8. They have the Bale Blast. So every single model is equipped with a Bale Blast and a Glimsteel Blade. And the Bale Blast is range 18, assault 2, strength 4, -1, 1 damage. Each time an attack is made with this weapon, an unmodified wound roll of 6 inflicts a mortal wound to the target in addition to normal damage. So they're like sniper rifles, although they can't shoot characters. I mean, they could if the character was, eligible to be shot, but, then they can't pick out characters. And their blades are -1 AP, 1 damage. They have Blade Artist, Power from Pain, but they also have From Out of the Shadows, which is essentially your standard arrive from Deep Strike deployment, or rather reserve deployment, no more than 9 inches away from an enemy model and or deployment zone. So during, I'm getting this wrong. It's during deployment. So they actually have infiltrating, right?
That they do.
There you go. So they are actual infiltrators, which is even better than I thought they were initially. I obviously jumped to a conclusion. So these guys are able to, be deployed wherever you need them to, as long as they're obviously 9 away from a deployment zone or an enemy model. Each time an attack targets this unit, subtract 1 from that attack's hit roll, which is really, really good. Obviously, unless, of course, you're up against some Cabalite Trueborn, in which case, oh well. But yeah, the fact that you're -1 to hit is no bad thing. They've got 5+ invulnerable saves, and they have a special rule called Fade Away. Once per battle, at the start of your movement phase, you can remove this unit from the battlefield, and then in the reinforcement step of your next movement phase, you can set this unit back up anywhere on the battlefield more than 9 away from enemy models. If the battle ends and this unit is not on the battlefield, it is destroyed. So mandrakes, I'm not necessarily going to go out of my way and suggest to you that mandrakes are the bestest thing, but the fact is that, again, credit to this book, they have definitely given them a good level of utility, and they've made them interesting, right? Like these guys rocking up on just outside the deployment zone, 18-inch range, assault 2, strength 4, -1 damage, but doing those mortal wounds. I mean, again, they're a really interesting unit, and also with the 5-up invuns and the fact that they're -1 to hit, they're going to be an annoying thing that you have to deal with, right? Like if you put this on your deployment zone, or on your enemy's deployment zone rather, that is something that they have to at least respect, and they have to think to themselves, right, what do I do against these guys? And I think that's really interesting. Points wise, they're a little bit pricey, I would say, but I think they're still at the sweet spot of being useful. So they're coming in about 15 points a model. So if you want to take the 10-man unit, that's going to be running you 150 points. But 150 points for 10 of these guys doesn't seem too unreasonable, based on my expectations. I mean, Paulie, what's your vibe on the Mandrakes as our resident Drukhari man? What do you think?
75 points for 5. I think they're not an auto-include, but I think, well, for me personally, I don't think they are, but I think a lot of other people will. I think you hit the nail on the head when you spoke about them as a utility unit. It's our first infiltrators that we've had, like, ever really, as Drukhari, and so that's really good ability to be able to block other infiltrators and other people from setting up. And also fade away is a really nice trick, where you can just sort of, fade away from the battlefield and come back as well. These will probably be used as action monkeys quite a lot, where you'll see them sort of appear on objectives, take table quarters for you, go do scramblers in the enemy's deployment zone. They are looking good. They're looking good.
Nice. Well, there we go. Go on then, Paulie. What one do you want to talk about, or what units are you most interested in discussing with us?
Oh, I think we need to go back to Witch Cult, or we need to go about Succubi. And we need to talk about why Succubi are the bomb. Let me plug in my charger for my laptop before it dies, like anything that Succubi will touch, because they are just so good.
There you go. Look at that smooth, professional, recording that you get from us here today.
That's it. It's like being on camera, isn't it?
Why have we invited him here, Phil? He's such an amateur.
So look at these.
He's better than the last one that we had.
That I'm recycling.
He's better than the last one. Yeah, that's fair enough. He's got notes. Oh my God, look at that.
It's not like I recorded an episode of Real Space Raiders yesterday.
Well, exactly.
But who knows? Maybe if you went to Real Space Raiders, you could get even more in-depth unit analysis. But probably
listen to this.
Probably not with the comedic value.
Well, maybe a bit more, a bit drier.
Yeah. Now we talk about it like, this is a good unit. This is good, but we don't. We talk with a plum. But I love you, Dan. I love you, Phil, as well. Thanks for having me. Right, so Succubi, really good. Succubi, 60 points. You can become a master succubus. The master succubus ability means that you can consolidate 3 inches with any direction you want, which is pretty useful. Succubi on their last rendition gained an attack. They lost access to the Impaler. Obviously, they're blade artists, and Brides of Death is now reroll 1s to wound in melee. There's an aura for other witch cult members, which is really, really good.
Solid.
So they have 6 attacks. They have access to a blast pistol, which is pew, 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 which is really good. They have access to a splinter pistol. They come with an agonizer and an archite glaive. They can replace the both of those for the various witch weapons, so they're pretty decent. But now it is when you tap into the different relics and warlord traits. Now I'm going to go through a few of them. We spoke about the blood glaive earlier being really good. I'm going to go into a combo which you're going to see a lot, and the reason why you also see this a lot is this doesn't rely on obsessions for relics and warlord traits. This is for universal witches. We're going to first talk about a relic, which was relatively popular, and this combo you used to see before, but the combo has doubled in efficiency. So it's called the Triptych Whip, which is an agonizer, which is, funny enough, guess by the name, it's got 3 bits of whip to it. And this adds +3 to your attacks. So you are on 6 attacks, that becomes 9 attacks, maybe 10 with Adrenalite if you're feeling fancy. The Triptych Whip was 4 up to wound. It's now 2 up to wound, which is really good, poisoned. It was -2 AP. It's now -3 AP, so it's even deadlier. And it went from damage 1 to damage 2. So this is one of the few weapons where all of the stats just went up. So that is really, really powerful, really good. And again, 6 is to wound, and -4. It's going to absolutely go through Marines. Like a bread through butter, a knife through butter.
I mean, bread could
Then
potentially go through butter. It depends how long you left it out in the sun.
That's it. I think Drukhari view everyone like butter, don't they? Precision Blows is a warlord trait, which before used to do 6s to hit, did mortal wounds, which was really good. Now it does the same, but it does mortals equivalent to the damage of the weapon you're using. So this Triptych Whip Succubus is going into combat with 10 attacks, which hit on 2s, wound on 2s, -3 to damage, and their 6s to hit do 2 mortal wounds apiece, which is
flipping hell
pretty tasty for 60 points to 75 points. Really useful. You can combine Precision Blows with the Blood Glaive as well. So your 6s to hit doing 3 damage as well. It's pretty good. Pretty good.
I mean that's pretty astounding, isn't it?
Yeah.
For 60/75 points, that's
yeah. You will see her, and I will probably run her as well. And she competes.
I mean, that is like, yeah, I was going to say that's like Smash Captain levels of craziness. Because I know, like, during the Chaos Space Marine releases, everyone was talking about the Chain Lord. Oh, the Chain Lord, he does all this stuff. But I was always like, yeah, but it's still a Chaos Space Marine Lord, which inherently is always going to be much more difficult to get across the board. Whereas obviously this thing is just going to absolutely bomb it across the board and then just get in your face and start smashing out mortal wounds and crazy amounts of damage. I mean, that is, yeah, I mean, that's nothing if not intimidating, especially for the price of admission. I mean, that's madness, right? So literally, okay, fair enough. You've got to put a warlord trait on it. You've got to put a relic on it. You've got to put some gear on it. But like, yeah, I mean, it may be a bit resource intensive, but the thing I like about it is it's not relying on wombo combos, if you know what I mean. It's not like I need to give it this psychic power and then I've got to make sure this blessing goes off and then I've got to do this, you know? It's literally, you just got to focus on getting her in and then watch the fun unfold, right?
Yeah, that's it. And it's actually, you say it's cheap, but it's almost, you're paying with like different currencies, you're paying with points, and you're paying with CP to make this happen as well. There's a really nice relic as well, which is unlocked by the Master Succubus, which is called Dancer's Edge. Now, this is Archite Glaive. It is +2 strength, -4 AP, damage 2. On an unmodified wound of a roll of a 6, invuns cannot be taken against that attack. So that's pretty nice. It's quite rare. I know obviously the Satan do it, but it's quite rare to get something which ignores invuns like that. So it's quite a nice ability for a succubus.
Mate, I mean, you convinced me. I clearly need to add some of these to my collection. It's the way to go.
So there's one more. So we'll take you into the world of silly. And you're
gonna rush and you're gonna queue jump Phil. I was gonna offer him a second option.
Oh no, this is one more succubus build. And this is one which you need
oh my god, this is still the same thing.
Yeah, wow, it's the same thing, but this is the succubus build, and you say you don't know about the succubus build. You don't know about any crazy succubus builds.
No, I've never heard of it.
This is going to get FAQ'd because it's so crazy. So you take your succubus, who has 6 attacks.
Right.
You give her Adrenalite on the charge, so we're going to say she's got 7 attacks. She has razor flails. So razor flails, you get to attack again for every attack you have. So you go to 14 attacks, which is pretty decent. Razor flails are -1 AP, 1 damage, strength user. You know, they're okay. Then you go to the Strife book, and you're taking Strife Relic, and you're taking the Strife Warlord trait. You are taking the Dark Lotus Toxin. Now this adds +1 strength and +1 damage. Okay, so your 14 attacks are hitting on twos. She's now strength 4. You could probably adjust that with combat drugs as well to make her strength 5. She's -1, bearing in mind -2 on 6s to wound and damage 2. So she is pretty decent. But this is where competitive edge comes in. And competitive edge has a new rules interaction. What happens is every time an attack doesn't make it to the inflict damage phase, you get to attack again. So you make 14 attacks, and then let's say 4 of them make it through someone's armor, you then get 10 attacks. But then this is when it cheeses even further. And this is why it needs an FAQ, because the razor flail means every time you make an attack, you make 1 more attack. So in theory, you've made 14 attacks, only 4 have inflicted damage. Then you roll your 10 attacks again, which then double out to 20 because you're razor flails. So you're putting in like 34 attacks on the charge, and it's absolutely crazy. And
so hang on, right? I'm gonna need this needs some further investigation. So what has occurred to make that 4 deduct from the 14? Like what are you saying just happened there? So I've run in, I've got my 14 attacks.
Yeah.
4 of them have resolved for some reason, but 10 haven't. But then that 10 becomes 20. What?
So you basically,
what is the interaction that I'm not understanding here?
Say something made 10 saving throws.
Right, yeah.
Then they haven't got to inflict damage phase, so you attack again with those.
Right, okay. So what you're saying is I've charged in, and I've done 14 attacks. I've hit 14 times is the assertion on this one, which is fair enough because, why not? And then the player that I have targeted has saved 10 out of 14. Well, at that point, I've got to inflict the wounds, though, right? So realistically, am I going to do 14 wounds? I mean, that's not likely, is it?
No, if you miss, it doesn't matter because your attack hasn't made it to inflict damage phase. So you get to attack again.
Right, okay. So irrespective of whether I have done wounds or not, because an attack has been allocated, it needs to be resolved to its final conclusion, i.e. damage, right?
Yeah. I'll read it very quickly. Each time this warlord fights,
please.
If all of its attacks target one enemy unit, after resolving all of those attacks, it can make a number of additional attacks against that enemy unit equal to the number of attacks that did not reach the inflict damage step of the attack sequence during that fight. So again, it's a new interaction. Nothing's done this before. And this is where, I'm sure the playtesters work hard, but someone's missed this interaction between this and razor flails and Dark Lotus Toxin. It's incredibly good.
So essentially what we're saying is you went in, you allocated 14 attacks. It doesn't matter whether they hit, miss, or whatever.
Yeah.
And then assuming that some amount of damage transpires, in this example 4, you then discount the 4 attacks that created the thing, and then you need to resolve 10 attacks. But because of razor flails, it becomes 20.
Yeah. So is razor flails the weapon that you're attacking with in the first place? Or was it an ability?
Yeah, it's just the basic witch weapon.
But it always doubles your attacks. So the interaction is your attacks become 10. There are 10 attacks to be resolved. But because of that weapon, because you're technically using that weapon, it becomes 20.
I mean, it depends on the interaction, because if it doubles your number of attacks, it's not doubling the number of hits that you get when you get to attack again. Unless, depending on the wording of what it says, like, do you just get to attack?
Each time an attack is made with this weapon, make 2 hit rolls instead of 1.
And then what's the bit again,
Are you making...
when you get to fight a second time, effectively? Does it say hits or attacks? Or
make a number of attacks. and the razor flails is every time we make an attack with this weapon.
I imagine it will be
Yeah,
FAQ just to say it's not
It's gonna be
accumulative because it seems
Yeah.
too good to be true otherwise.
Or be capped. It's just
Or they clarify that you don't use your base profile, like you have to use your like you're not using a weapon for those extra attacks or something. I don't know, because
you've already
that's
like doubled your attacks via that weapon already. You can't do that a second time on top of.
Well, you can if what Paulie's saying is true. I mean, I'm not saying that he's wrong. I'm just saying it's interesting, right? It's open to some interpret. This is where the fun starts, where you start getting into the nitty gritty of it. I mean, hey, it definitely needs an FAQ, Paulie. You're not wrong about that.
It needs an FAQ. It's almost like it's not an impressive combo in the sense that this isn't going to make it past like the Drukhari FAQ, right?
Yeah. But, it's not an impressive combo until it blends a unit of, I don't know, 20 orc boys or something, right? I mean, it's pretty reasonable.
It'll blend anything. It's really good.
Well, yeah, clearly. Will it blend? Yes, it will. Come on, Phil, give us another unit. We'll do one more each, and then we'll summarize how we feel about things and call it a night.
Fair enough. I mean, as much as I want to talk about the Court of Yarkon, because I just love those alien Gribblies, I think we... Well, no, I think we should really talk about the special characters. So I'm going to pick Lilith Hesperactus.
Ooh, what's she do?
Well, she is also a succubus / succubi. So she succubi. So she is obviously the special character. She's got movement of 8 inches, weapon skill and ballistic skill of 2+, strength and toughness of 3, 5 wounds, 7 attacks, 7, leadership 8, and a 6+ save. She's armed with Lilith's blades. You can obviously only have one of her. So her blades are just close combat weapons, +1 strength, -3 AP and 1 damage, so that's strength 4. Each time an attack is made with this weapon, an unmodified hit of 6 scores 1 additional hit. She's obviously got a ton of abilities, so I'll go through them. She's got Blade Artist and Power from Pain as sort of standard. She's got At Last a Challenge. Each time a model makes a melee attack that targets a character unit, you can reroll the hit rolls and the wound roll. It's pretty good. She's got Brides of Death Aura. While a friendly Cult of Strife core unit is within 6 inches of this model, each time a model in that unit makes a melee attack, reroll a wound roll of 1. That's pretty strong. Quicksilver Dodge. She's got a 4+ invuln save. And each time a melee attack is made against her, subtract 1 to that hit roll. So pretty survivable. So she's also, because she's still got more, Deadly Dance. Each time this model makes a consolidation move, it can move an additional 3 inches, and it does not have to finish this move closer to the closest enemy unit, which is a little bit like
deceptively
the
strong
rule you were talking about earlier, where it doesn't have that extra caveat. So yeah, the fact that she can move in any direction is really good. She's also got 2 more rules. One of them is Natural Perfection. In your command phase, select one of the following: thrilling acrobatics. Until the end of your turn, this model is eligible to declare a charge in the turn in which she fell back or advanced, or gory spectacle in the fight phase of this turn. If this model destroys any enemy units, then at the end of that phase, it can fight again. That is
any enemy models.
Any enemy models. Wow, that is crazy good. Yeah. And then the last one is No Escape. Each time an enemy unit, excluding Titanic units, is within engagement range of this model and is selected to roll off with your opponent. If it wins, that unit cannot fall back. So I like how somehow she can stop a tank from falling back. Madness.
She's got really big hair, mate. Anything's possible when you got
I guess
that
trap it in the treads.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that sort of hair will get everywhere, so it may as well get in those tank treads. I mean, the ability to fight again is gonna consistently be what you're going for, right? I mean, obviously, the ability to fall back and charge is not without its advantages, and it's going to be obviously very situational. It's good that she's got the options. And it's good that they actually made it a choice rather than just giving her both, because that would have been probably a little bit overkill. So there you go. Weird question statement here. If she's in a transport, can she select a natural perfection form? Any thoughts or feelings on that? Because she technically wouldn't be on the battlefield.
No, I
so
would
much
assume
like
not.
if she was a chaplain. Yeah. So if you had her in a Venom and you moved her up, technically she wouldn't be able to choose a natural perfection. I don't know. Paulie, what's your vibe on that?
Just reading it, I guess she's not on the battlefield to select then, is she? But then
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But then it just says in your command phase, like one of the following.
Yeah, I think the rules where they say
the model doesn't exist, doesn't it?
I think the rules where they say if you're in a vehicle, you're not on the table. So therefore, they've taken that kind of wording out of the data sheet because it's in the core rules.
So we suspect that she wouldn't be able to do. So basically, if you were bombing her forwards in a Venom for whatever reason, she wouldn't be able to choose that form. Potentially. I mean, we could be wrong about that. That's more me just kind of... Because I know with, like, you know, chaplains or whatever, they have the same thing in the command... Well, not the command phase, because that's not chaplains. Chaplains do it at the start of the battle round. But if they're not on the battlefield, they can't do it. But, you know, if my Dreadnought is in a Dreadnought drop pod and I wanted to use the stratagem... I can't remember what it's called, but the thing that will either make him a lieutenant or a captain, I can't do that if he's not present in the command.
Well,
phase.
yeah, it's like
so
the same with Chapter Master, where you can select one unit to give them re-roll all the hit rolls. It's like you couldn't do that if you're in a vehicle because you're just not there.
So that's an interesting scenario, potentially. Something to look out for, potentially. Again, something which requires a little bit of FAQ attention, I would imagine. But I think we can all universally agree that Lilith is cool, right? I mean, you know, say what you will about the model. I personally prefer the old one. It's a shame as well that they got rid of her options. I used to like the fact that she used to be able to take the net and trident thing or whatever it was that she used to get in addition to the blades. Was it a net that she used to get a trident-y type weapon, didn't she, Paulie?
Yeah, so she had the option to take the impaler, and her hair used to count as a shard net. But then gradually she's lost all those abilities, and now all she has is her blades. So she's still pretty fierce. She's good.
I mean, it makes sense, though, right? I mean, same thing happened with Dark Angels. Belial used to be able to take any variant of combat weapons. He used to have a Thunderhammer Storm Shield or Lightning Claws or the Sword of Silence, whereas now he's just always Sword of Silence because that's what the model comes with, right? So
yeah,
it's not uncommon.
She's good. Like, she lost a few things where she used to have a 3-up in one. Now it's the 4-up with the -1 to hit, and she's gained attacks, and her AP has gone down, but her strength has gone up. And a lot of people malign that she's damage 1, but if she was damage 2, I think should be absolutely insane. So I think something that Lilith suffers from, which Urian does and Drazar does, is warlord traits, in that you can't use in the Alliance of Agonies or the stratagems, you can't use them to give special characters their warlord traits, which is a massive shame. So a normal succubus in a real space raid gets a warlord trait, access to that. Lilith doesn't, which I don't understand always why that is the case. I quite like the Crusade rule where special characters come with their warlord traits. So it's a bit of a shame, and I think it's probably due to this that due to, you know, some of the combos that Succubi can pull off, you probably will see Succubi on the battlefield a little bit more than Lilith. But due to the potency of Strife, you still will see the Queen of Knives on the battlefield.
There you go. Good times. In terms of a unit that I would like to talk about, again, just because they've always been a fond favourite of mine, and that is the Scourges. So Scourges are a unit that never really got huge amount of love, I felt like, in the last Codex. I quite enjoyed them, but I think they were always a little bit of a strange one. And I think in some respects, they've often struggled to find a place in Drukhari overall. I mean, again, I love the way the unit looks. I think it's one of the most beautiful model ranges that GW does, and I think the Scourges really stand out as one of the more kind of iconically Drukhari units. And I wish they would give a similar level of attention in the future to the swooping hawks, because they could definitely learn a lot from those kits. But the idea of the Scourges is essentially that they are a mobile devastator squad, right? Like that was the original kind of template for them, which was really strange when they first came into existence in 3rd edition, because in 3rd edition, as we've already said in this segment, they were basically like Cabalites but with wings. But they were unique in so much as they were heavy weapon wielding, flying Cabalite warriors. And back in 3rd edition, everything with a jump pack or everything that flew was assumed to be some form of assaulting unit. So back then it really kind of shook things up because no one quite expected it to be what it ended up being. And obviously since then we've had lots of units that have these sorts of abilities and sort of fills this archetype. But Scourges definitely are cool. So look, I mean, rules-wise, they're movement 14, weapon skill, ballistic skill 3+, strength toughness 3, 1 wound, 2 attacks, leadership 7, and a 4+ save. The leader of the squad has additional attack and additional leadership, pretty standard. This unit contains this is power rating stuff, sorry, I won't bother reading that. But every model is equipped with a shard carbine and a plasma grenade, or plasma grenades. The shard carbine, for those who are unaware, is an assault-free straight to -1 AP, I've started reading the wrong thing, but it's a 1 damage, poison 4+ thing. So it's a free shot, range 18 poison weapon, which is pretty amazing overall, really, because it just, shoots a lot of poison 4+ weapons. But where the Scourges are obviously quite interesting is up to 4 Scourges can have their shard carbines replaced with one of the followings: the Blaster, Dark Lance, Drukhari heavy wire blaster, 1 heat lance, 1 shredder, 1 splinter cannon. Again, here's another thing I suppose that's actually quite interesting. The weapon options here for the Scourges are the weapon options that are in the box, right? So this is another one like with the Death Guard, where you can only take the weapons that it ships with. Is that correct, Paulie? That's the stuff that you get in the box, right?
So it's all in the box, but as I understand it, you don't have to. You can still go 4 shredders. You can still go 4 blasters, as it's worded. It's not. You can only take 1 of each. So you get 1 of each in the box, but as I understand it, you can still go 4 blasters, unless you're
okay. Fine. So they
differently.
No. It's just because obviously the fact that it says 1 blaster, 1 dark lance, 1 Drukhari haywire blaster. I don't think typically when they've worded that for other things that they've used that same specifically 1 statement. I think they say that you can change it for las cannon.
Yeah, well, what they say is 4 Scourges can each have their shard carbine replaced with one of the following. So it's because it's got the word each in front. I think that it is correct in terms of each one can have one of them. So you can have multiples in the squad. News.
And I think that's respectful to the people who will have modeled these over the years with the different gear and stuff.
But people like Paulie, not those Death Guard players who are sort of limited to what's in the box.
Yeah. Well, they're just, Death Guard have only been around for 4 years or whatever in their current codex form. So Games Workshop doesn't mind upsetting those guys, but as Paulie has said before, don't mess with the Drukhari players. They get grumpy. But yeah, the leader of the squad can have his shard carbine replaced with a splinter pistol or a blast pistol, and they also come equipped with, or rather, can be equipped with one of the following: 1 agonizer, 1 power lance, and 1 venom blade. The power lance, I think, is unique to this squad. I think they're the only guys with access to a power lance, and that's strength +2, -2, 1 damage. It's quite cool when you got the guy modeled with the power lance. It looks pretty great. The gimmick about these guys used to be that they used to have ghost plate armor, which gave them an invulnerable save in addition to their regular save. But now, everyone gets that 6-up invuln. So theirs has now been increased to 5 because it used to be it was a 4-up armor save with a 6-up invuln. Now it's a 4-up armor save with a 5-up invuln. And then you've got Wing Strike, which is essentially these guys can arrive from reserves outside of 9. And because you can arm these guys with some pretty tasty weaponry, there's some pretty strong options there. I think the Heat Lance is the standout one for me at the moment. I think the Heat Lance was a bit underwhelming before because it was a strength 6 weapon before, if I remember correctly. and it didn't nearly do as much damage. The unique novelty of the Heat Lance before was it was a combination of the old Lance rules and the Melter rules, so your armor could never go beyond, or rather for the shooting attack, it always treated your armor as being 12, but you also got to roll 2d6 against that armor penetration, but you were strength 6 because of the Heat Lance, blah, blah, blah. Whereas now it's just strength 8 minus 4 d6 plus 2 damage. So it's basically a range 18 melter gun, but you don't have to be within half range in order to get the plus 2. So 4 of these guys coming down with Heat Lance is obviously going to put a hole in some armor. And I think that is a valuable addition to a Drukhari army. So I do feel like there's a value to the Scourges. But as Paulie has asserted before, they are blades for hire. But I don't necessarily feel that's a bad thing, though, because you feel okay letting them operate on their own. I think they're pretty reasonable. I mean, again, Paulie, what's your vibe on the Scourges? You reevaluating them at the moment?
Yeah, I think Scourges are something which you're going to see a lot. I think you're going to see it en masse, especially like I was saying earlier with Black Heart and being in a real space raid. You can take advantage of the Archon's auras. So not just for the to hit, but also to wound, rear on the ones. Heat Lances are very good at them. Probably Heat Lances are probably better on Reavers because Heat Lances move to heavy, like quite a lot of the Drukhari weaponry. The jury's out on Haywire Blasters. So Dan, if you took a read of that, tell me what you think of Haywire Blasters and whether you think they have got better or worse in their new edition.
So they are now range 24, heavy D3, strength 3, minus 3, D3 damage. They have blast. Each time an attack is made with this weapon, if the target is a vehicle unit, an unmodified wound roll of 4+ is always successful, and an unmodified wound roll of 6 inflicts D3 mortal wounds on the target in addition to any normal damage. Ooh.
It's weird, isn't it?
Because before you did more wounds on 4+, right? But then you could do the wounds. So yeah, but it was only ever one mortal wound, right?
Yeah, and it was.
But then if you rolled a 6, it was D3.
D3, and then it was it strength 4 minus 1 damage 1, whereas this is now strength 3 minus 3 damage D3.
Yeah, but the fact that you're always winning on 4s against vehicles kind of lets you get away with that. I think. I kind of feel like it's the right decision because I feel like before it was too much of a no-brainer. Like, I think before they were so strong against certain types of vehicles that it created a bit of a kind of negative fun situation, especially with like Harlequins. Harlequins were, obviously this isn't the Harlequin version, it's the Drukhari version. But yeah, I felt like the Haywire was almost a little bit too strong before. So even though I will acknowledge it's probably not as good theoretically, I think they've balanced out because the damage is potentially there, but you've got to obviously get through their armor and deal with that. But you got the -3, which is pretty strong. So yeah, I mean, it's much of a muchness, mate. I don't think they're worse. I don't think they're necessarily better, but I can't stand here and tell you that I think they're a lot worse. I don't know. What's your flavor with them?
So I like blasters. I think just the fact that you're always going to be deep striking these guys, and they're going to be hitting on freeze when they come down. But I used to really like dark lances back in the day. Like, yeah, so what, you hit on 4s, but you can still jump around the back of the board shooting stuff. But dark lance,
I mean, the dark lance.
Yeah, they have dark lances. They have pretty much anything.
I mean, the Dark Lance is pretty amazing in so much as it always will do 4 damage, which makes it better than the Heat Lance, right? Because the Heat Lance does a minimum of 3. This thing does a minimum of 4. Yeah. So,
but the Heat Lance can go up to 8 damage, can't it? Which I guess is the true of throwing.
But I suppose you've got to maybe try and look at it unoptimistically. Like, what's the worst case scenario?
That's it, isn't it?
Because I guess what's the average with a D3? The average you're going to get out of a D3. I suppose that's the problem, though, isn't it? Because it's D3 plus 3. So if you roll anything better than a 1, you are as soon as you roll anything better than a 2, you're losing value, right? Because obviously with the heat Heat Lance, if I roll a 2, then we're getting 4, which is the same for the Dark Lance. But if I roll a 3, then I'm getting 5. Whereas then the Dark Lance will still be getting 5. So yeah, from 4+ onwards, it starts to get advantageous to go Heatlands, doesn't it? Because that's when you start to see the upside. So if you roll a 4 for the damage, you're going to be better off with the Heatlands, I guess. But anyway, yeah, I like them. I like Scourges. I think they're, again, one of those units that have been underrated, and I think it's going to be cool to be able to see them again. But Paulie, you got the honors of choosing the last one, buddy. So what's it going to be?
It's really tough. I think I'll do some quick shout outs to different units. The Incubi are an auto take. You're going to see Incubi everywhere.
Everyone's talking about Incubi. I chose not to speak about Incubi because
they're just great. And do you know what? Like, as much as I love witches, I think we've covered witches for the most part, going through the different characters. They're phenomenal. We spoke about Camelot Warriors. Urine Rakaf's pretty decent. Drazar is an absolute beat stick. Drazar is close to an auto include. He is, I think you covered it pre-podcast talk when, like, you know, it's what you hope Aspect Warriors will become. That he's really good. Grotesques are still, you know, decent.
I would say, just actually to add on Drazar, there is a problem with Drazar though, right? How do you put him in your army?
Oh, so I add him to my army where I take a real space raid, and to unlock my strife stratagems, I need a patrol, but I don't necessarily want a second succubus. So that is where Drazar pops in and leads that little patrol for me. That's why I access. But
gotcha.
It's hard to get his warlord trait unless you choose him to be a warlord. But obviously, in the real space raids, it has to be an Archon as your warlord.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and obviously the free HQ slots get filled with the succubus, the homunculus, and the Archon, which means that you can't take Drazar. But then obviously you need to add a second detachment to put him in if you're gonna do real space anyway. Sorry, you were saying?
Yeah, it's a massive shame to see units like Hellions get some nice treatment, and then units like Beasts, who were probably some of the worst units before, and they've had a few buffs here and there, but they're not as good. It's really hard to decide on my last unit, and I could talk about the transports because the transports have some really good options now, where Blade Veins are they're +1 strength now. They're not like a flat strength 4. So Raiders in combat are strength 7, and Chain Snares give them 3 extra attacks. So your Raiders are actually jumping into combat, and bearing in mind they've got power from pain now, so they're going to be hitting with freeze in a particular turn with strength 7, and they are going to be doing -1 and with 6 attacks. So, you know, Raiders are going to be jumping in, actually tearing stuff up. But you know what? I'm going to go to Court of the Archon. And not necessarily because I think they're an amazing unit, but they are really cool. Now, what I've always loved about 40k is like all the random sort of aliens and Xenos. I recently picked up the Liber Xenologist book, and that is absolutely phenomenal. I love looking at all the different rare alien species. Like Jakiro were one of my favorite sort of species, and I was really pleased to see them come back a few years ago. And when Court came out, I fell in love with them straight away. And I think Slith are probably one of my favorite models and sort of ideologies, as it were. I love Lamians. I love them all, and I think it's really cool. But obviously, they had to have a bit of a change, where in the previous codex, they weren't characters, but they were single infantry models. But for 9th edition, they were phenomenal because you could put them into strategic reserve, and because they weren't characters, they could come on and deploy your scramblers, whereas it's not the case anymore. They've seen a few changes. What's a really good benefit for them all is they all have power from pain now. So before, because the Lamian is the only true Drukhari, she was the only one that had access to this. But they're now 1 unit, and you have to have at least 4 models. You have up to 12, and you can only have up to 4 of each particular one. But what's nice about this is you can have a unit of 12, and that's 32 wounds on the table, which is the most wounds you get into 1 unit. They all have different rules. So, for example, the Slith, the Slith are incredible. Like they live in Comra and they deal with slaves. They love the Borsri just as much as Drukhari. But obviously, Drukhari, they backstab each other, but they employ Slith because Slith are so stupid that they actually never think of the idea of like betraying the Archon. That's why they're so sort of faithful. But their particular buff that they give is a friendly Archon unit within 3 inches of them can't target. The Archon can't be targeted with range attacks, which is really strong. But the way all these buffs
so it's the bodyguard rule, right?
Yeah. But before it used to be when the Archon failed saves, it'll be allocated to the Sliff. Whereas nowadays it's just a case of no, you can't shoot the Archon, you have to shoot the Sliff. But all the different auras, they permeate through the core of the Archon unit. So you can have one Sliff and then the rest of your unit can be made up of Urgals or Lamians. But as long as the Sliff is still alive, you can keep using that rule, which is really nice. The Lamian has a Toxin Crafter aura, which is when a friendly Archon or Treeborn unit is within 3 inches. If the court has any Lamian models, each time a model in that unit, which is the Archon or Treeborn, makes an attack with a poison weapon, an unmodified to hit roll of a 6 automatically wounds the target. Which would be really cool if your Treeborn weren't going to be sat on a Raider. So this is really rarely going to be seen, which is a bit of a shame.
Yeah.
I think it could have been done a bit differently. The Urgals still have their +2 attacks on the charge, and Urgals and Sliff now both have a 5-up Feel No Pain, which is actually really good considering Sliff and Urgals all have Invuns. This unit is actually quite resilient as well. They've all Sliff taken a bit of a weird tumble. They're now toughness 3. They used to be a toughness 5 units, but I think it's probably to standardize the unit now to make it a bit easier to sort of use and understand. So it's always toughness 3. But they've all got 3 wounds. There's a myriad of attacks. Medusa are quite nice, where they're like a parasite which like lives on top of like a Cabalite warrior's body. And it's a bit like Cyclops from X-Men, where they lift their visor and they do like an eye burst, which translate into game terms as range 12, pistol D6, strength 4, -2, damage 1, and it automatically hits. So it's kind of cool, but you could have sort of 4 of those in the unit doing 4d6, strength 4, -2 hits, which is it's kind of nice. So I think there's some benefits here. I don't know how competitive they are, but at the same time, I really want to run them because they're just really cool. I think they're probably one of like the most flavoursome, cool units, like not just in the Codex but in the game. And again, it's another way of sort of seeing the lore like come to life through your army. So really cool,
yeah.
really cool.
No, I did love that about them when they first introduced them in the 5th edition book, and I think Jez Goodwin was talking about it at the time, and he was talking about the idea that within the world of the Drukhari, because as you've already alluded to, because everyone's out there trying to do them over in one way or another, the fact that the court of the Archon is made up of all these different alien species, with the exception of a few obviously Drukhari additions, but yeah, the fact that they choose to kind of be surrounded by these guys because they can't trust their kin is quite something. I think there was something in the original 5th edition book that talked about like incubi sometimes are trustworthy enough to be hired as bodyguards, but more often than not, it's the court of the Archon that is where they go, which is super interesting. I like the way that they've broken down the unit so it's not minimum 1 of each. I do like the fact that you can theoretically take 4 Sliff and that's the unit, right? Because you famously once upon a time, Paulie, were rocking. How many Sliff did you have? You used to call it the Sliff bomb. What was it, like 9 of them or something?
I own about 10, but I have 8 painted, and I used to run 8 in a Raider with an Archon and a Lamian. The Lamian was there just to die in explosions. But they're really good because they had like 3 or 4 attacks on the charge, strength 5. They do a lot of damage, and obviously pump out a lot of poison with a shard carbine. So really cool.
Yeah, they were cool, man. I like the Sliff model as well. I've still got a couple of them kicking around somewhere. They were really cool. And it's good now that the Urgul has got a Blackstone Fortress mini that has kind of updated it quite a bit, because I always felt the Urgul was a bit of a strange one. I mean, he's still strange now when you look at the Blackstone Fortress mini, but yeah, like the original one with his sort of angry, get off my land kind of like vibe to him. I don't know. He sort of looked like a badly animated character kind of waddling across an allotment potentially. But yeah, no, that was quite cool. And again, I suppose there's lots of conversion potential for the Lamian, and the Medusa has always been an interesting one as well.
Do you want to know a top hobby hack? That the Medusa model comes with 2 heads. So if you buy that, you can use that head on another like a Cavalite warrior, and you have 2 Medusa. Fun facts with Sky.
There it is. There's the segment there. All right, guys, look, we have talked about this for a considerable length of time. Let's get some final thoughts on it, and then we will, say our piece and move along. I'll kick it off. We'll follow it with Phil, and we'll end with the Sky Serpent. You can have the final word on all this. But look, from my perspective, as I said many times throughout this and many times before, it's incredible to see what Games Workshop are doing with these books at the moment. There is so much expansive lore and opportunities for you to express your creativity as a player. And I do think it's really reassuring that we're coming out of this with so much flexibility and so much possibility. If all of these books continue in this way, it is definitely going to be a strength, a strong position for the game overall, because ultimately, it's going to be really hard to pin down a meta or to pin down, what is good when there's just so many options. I think it makes it really hard for people like me who always historically played lots of different armies. It definitely feels like I'm going to need to potentially knuckle down and really focus on a couple moving forwards, because, playing the board, as in like playing a bunch of different armies, feels less and less viable because there's just so much to remember now in terms of stratagems and bolt-ons and extras. But yeah, I mean, everyone has said it. It's clear this book is spectacular. It's a brilliant example of what we can expect going forwards, hopefully. And man, if every other book is even, is as good as this going forwards, we're in for a fantastic edition. So yeah, I love it. I think it's incredible. It's definitely got me tempted to paint up some Drukhari, but seeing as Drukhari have always only ever been a sort of, lately anyway, an addition to my Craftworld collection, I think it's reasonable to assert that I probably won't, because I'm probably never going to get to a place where I'm going to be able to field a whole army of these guys anytime soon. And probably by the time I'm almost halfway done, they'll probably release the Craftworld book and I'll lose interest. So yeah, I'll leave that to Paulie to enjoy, and the guys over at the Real Space Raiders podcast. Ooh, go on, Phil, get your thoughts in.
Yeah, it looks like a really strong codex. I think, as everyone said, it's like really thematic, lots of options. I mean, potentially too many options. Like, we spent the majority of the podcast going through just the first handful of pages of rules before we even got to the data sheets. There's so many rules, like army specific, and I get why, because you don't have just one army. It's effectively 3 smaller armies in one, and each one has its own bunch of sub-factions, which come with its own relics and warlord traits and, loads of options. So there's a lot to get your head around. And then in addition to that, you've got your Real Space Raid sort of special detachment as well. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff, which is good and also bad for some people. It's a lot to learn and get your head around. And as you said, it's going to be a struggle for people that do play this army plus other armies potentially as well. But overall, it seems really good. I like that there's a lot of underperforming units that I've never seen on the table before whenever I've come up against Drukhari, that they all seem like they've got a reasonable buff, and that they're now sort of much more valid choices. So I think that's good. I got the impression most people are saying that the fighters, like the planes, are all a bit naff, and that with the exception of the Void Raven bomber. But I guess that will be an interesting thing to see about flyers in general going forwards in this edition, if they're deliberately toning them down or not.
I mean, that's a 50% success rate though, because they've only got 2 flyers, so if one of them's good, wow, that's at least something. I mean, yeah, definitely. They definitely needed to tone down flyers based on the end of 8th edition, but I would like to see them get to a place where flyers still have value. I still think they do in Craftworld.
Well, wait till your Codex comes out, and then say that.
Oh, mate, they'll be incredible. Of course they will be. If this is what they've done to Drukhari, just wait till you see that Craftworld book, mate. It's going to be off the chain. Anyway, Paulie, come on, final thoughts, mate. What do you reckon?
The book is incredible. It's really nice. It's really good. And it's the closest Drukhari I've ever played. like I said earlier, to how I think I and many people envisage them with the lore. A lot of people think it's OP. A lot of people think it's top tier. I think it is near the top. We don't really have a proper meta, so it's really actually hard to gauge how good it is. I think it's going to send ripples through the meta. I think people are going to have to prepare for Drukhari, and I think Drukhari are going to have answers to other things in the meta as it is as well. I think Drukhari have always been glass cannons, and I think at the moment they still are glass, but they're not cannons. They're cannons with nukes on top now. Like, there's some really, really nice offensive builds. Lots of ways to build mortal wounds into the army. Like, we haven't even spoken about like leadership attacks and things like that. But I think Drukhari, Dark Eldar have always been quite a finesse army. And I think as time goes on, as Codex creep sort of appears, they'll become even more of a finesse army as all the other new codexes become good. And I think potentially some new archons might find themselves, the army is built on toughness 3 and like paper planes. And I think people might get caught out in certain matchups about realizing it. But at the same time, it's all about maximizing that strength and, attacking all at once and a death by 1,000 cuts. And I've always said the model range is phenomenal, and the amount of variety in the sub-factions is great. So the Codex just builds on that and does even more. And really, really hope to see lots of new Drukhari players join the raiding forces in Commonwealth.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's definitely top tier if it's in the hands of a player that can unlock that potential. And I think that's one of the things that makes it really exciting, I think, for a lot of more experienced players, is that there's so much expression within the book in terms of how you want to approach it. And I think that's really exciting. And obviously, as Paulie has correctly said, we've scratched the surface of this. There is so much. In order for us to do this service, we'd probably need to be talking for another 3 hours. And with all due respect to those joining me here right now, it is getting on to a bit into, in a bit past midnight right now. And I've still got an intro and an outro that I need to record at some point. So in the interest of timing, I think that's pretty much it. But obviously, if you'd like to hear people wax lyrical about Drukhari for hours on end and get even more in depth, I mean, there's probably no better podcast out there than Real Space Raiders. So hopefully you've enjoyed listening to Paulie talk about it. And if you want to hear more about him, go and check out Real Space Raiders and get more information there. But otherwise, that's been us, gents. Thank you so much for coming here, Paulie. It's been great having you. Cheers for your contributions, Phil. Always a delight chatting things through with your good self.
Of course. And thanks very much, Paulie, for coming along.
Of course.
It's been good.
No, thank you both. It's been a pleasure coming back. I hope to be back again soon.
Awesome. Yeah, look forward to it, man. All right, transitional noise. Woo! All right, Phil, it's 1 a.m. We've probably had enough, but we now need to do community questions. So come on, what you got for me?
We've got some good ones. We've got our first one from Capable Bob over on the Instagrams. What do you guys...
Capable Robert?
Capable Bob. Yeah, well, Robert, yes, or Bobby, maybe.
Or Bobby.
Or Jim. I think is that a thing? No, maybe not.
Bert?
What do you think, or what do you guys think would be the best first few purchases for someone starting a new Drukhari army?
I mean, it's fair to say the combat patrol is going to be the bestest thing to start with, because that combat patrol is extraordinarily good value, right? Yeah,
you get quite a lot of stuff in it, and it's clearly so popular it's out of stock, at least.
Oh yeah, it's easily the best they've ever done. I mean, it's a Raider, Ravager, Archon, unit of Kabalite warriors.
Yeah, and 5 Incubi.
And 5, I mean, wow. It's so good, man. That is such a good place to start. And then probably off the back of that, I would then look to expand into a unit of witches, and then probably then, just for the sake of potentially looking at the most competitively viable version of the list, probably look to then add some racks and a homunculus. I mean, it really depends on what you want out of it, right? Because, I mean, I always go back to when I was starting out in 40k in general, right? I went into the store when I was like 12 years old, and the guy was like, "What do you want?" And I was like, "I'm going to have that Elder Dreadnought now, Wraithlord." And he was like, "Well, you probably really would prefer to start off with this box of Guardians if you're interested in, in collecting Elder." I was like, "Nah, big old metal Dreadnought, mate. That's where it's at." So yeah, it really depends on you as a player and what you're thinking of adding to your collection and what you think is cool. I think you can't go wrong, obviously, with that Combat Patrol as a baseline, but I think from there on in, it's massively going to depend on what you're looking at. I mean, by the sounds of it, Hellions, right? I mean, that was a pretty coherent message, wasn't it, in the show itself? Get some Hellions if you can.
I think overall, like almost anything is good, so knock yourself out. And obviously, you can go down doing, because there's 3 parts to the army, you can do every single part or just focus on one potentially. And even in the Book of Rust, if you want to do just witches, that seems like that would be the route you would go down. But yeah, if you're doing something a bit more generic, going for that kind of real space raider force with one of everything, then yeah, the Combat Patrol box seems the starting point. But then you can easily dive off, because I think effectively you got 3 troops minimum, but one is each of the different types, and then you can just pile into your favorite thing next. So yeah.
And then we didn't really massively get into it during the show itself because of just time and other things. But I think, yeah, there's a lot to be said for the transport vehicles in this army. And there is a debate between which is better, the Raider or the Venom. It seems to be now that the Raider is the option, which is obviously great value for those who've been doing the army for years, because the Venom was very much the choice before this. But yeah, get yourself a good selection of Raiders and Venoms, because that's going to be the backbone of your army, right? You need that mobile defensive mechanism in order to keep your army survivable, but also where you want them to be. So yeah, Raiders and Combat Patrol, some more warriors, a few more bits and pieces. But yeah, Combat Patrol is easily the place to start. What's next, Phil? What we got?
We got Tabletop Journeys. He says this one is really one that you could probably answer more than me. But from a lore perspective, do you think you can do this one? From a lore perspective, could you guys briefly explain the relationship between Drukhari and their Craftworld kin? They could ally on the tabletop in 8th, but is it fluffy to do so? And will you still be able to do soup in 9th without being Ynnari, do you think?
So, fluff-wise, it goes a little something like this. Back in the olden days, the Aeldari were a very debauched group of, aliens that essentially ruled over the universe, right? So the idea is that they conquered all their enemies, they had surpassed all other civilizations, and they got a little bit, drunk with power, shall we say. Now, the ones who were extra, into some weird stuff, decided to take refuge in the webway in the city of Komarath, and then essentially, become what is now the Drukhari today. And the reason why the Drukhari is still the way they are is because essentially when the fall happened and Slaanesh was birthed and splintered reality, creating the Eye of Terror, which then obviously has gone on to become the Rift, or at least part of the Rift. Essentially, the Drukhari were protected because they were hidden within the webway, so they weren't able to be obtained. Where they differ from the Craftworlds is that they retain their kind of long eternal lives, or not eternal as such because they're not eternal, but they live for a long time through feeding off of emotions from their captured creatures, humans, whatever they may be. And that's very different from the Craftworlds, because the Craftworlds essentially were a series of like arcs that were created by these visionary farseers as they went on to become, who foresaw the fall and decided to flee in these ships. There's also a third variable to that, which is the Exodites, and the Exodites had left and started roaming the universe and populating planets long before the fall as well.
I thought you were going to say Harlequins when you said third.
Well, no, because Harlequins actually didn't exist until the fall. because the idea with the sorry, that's not true. The Harlequins did because they were guardians of the Black Library, so they've always been tied to that. But the Harlequins basically took on this troop kind of player mentality because they effectively play out the events of the Fall. So they're basically like a traveling circus that goes from Craftworld to the Dark City of Commonwealth and other places to essentially show the story of the fall of the Elder and to educate, the Elder on the Fall, essentially. So yeah, there's a lot of extra elements to it, but the broad strokes is that the idea with the Aeldari is that the Craftworld Aeldari and the Drukhari are quite opposed in terms of ideologies. There's a lot of stuff that the Drukhari really don't go in for, which the Craftworlds have accepted as a relatively necessary evil, such as Psykers, for example. Drukhari just have nothing to do with Psykers because they draw chaos towards them. But whereas the Aeldari use kind of more kind of sophisticated technologies to try and protect them against stuff, and then they also, use the kind of connections with the spirits and the old. Sorry, I just dropped something on the floor there. They tie into all those different things. So yeah, they're different sort of ideologies. And to be honest with you, I've never understood why they said that Drukhari and Craftworld go together. The logic is that it's better that they fight together against impossible odds because it's better that the race survives in some way, shape, or form. And also, people who are Drukhari can leave the Dark City and join a Craftworld and join the Path, which is essentially the kind of core lifestyle of people on Craftworlds, which is essentially that they go into this Path system. Because the idea is that because the Aeldari experience things a million times more so, or maybe not a million, but like 1,000 times more so than humanity, the idea is that they can't do the same thing over and over again because then they become obsessed by it. So the Path system is you do this for a set period of time and then you have to go do something else. And that's the idea to keep them from becoming obsessed with something, which then turns into, all sorts of weird things that make things go wrong. So yeah, but they are quite opposed. For example, the way that an incubi, for example, earns their incubi position, or at least in the old lore, I don't know if it's still relevant today, was that they would have to go out and slay an aspect warrior. So they would have to basically go out, find an aspect warrior, kill them, and then as they were dying, they would have to take their soul stone, which is essentially the thing that protects them from Slaanesh, that traps their soul within it so they don't, get fed to Slaanesh, and then they would smash it. So the idea is it's like the ultimate insult that they've not only just killed this guy, but they've then smashed the means by which their soul will be saved. And then if that's not funny enough, they then wear that on themselves, showing off that they did it. So yeah, there's a lot of reasons why they shouldn't get on, but they do because rules. Does that answer the question, Phil, or did I say a lot without saying anything?
I think so. They are, the way I've always seen it is they're sort of allies of convenience. It's like that they don't get along, but if someone else from another race comes along, they will team up together against any other race, begrudgingly, but that they will do it. And I think that's roughly how it works. And he also mentions about, do you think they can soup outside of Ynnari? No, they can't, because there's a special rule. We didn't actually talk about it in the podcast. It's called was it Weakling Kin, I think, which basically says you can't have a mixed detachment of Aeldari unless they're all Ynnari. So Ynnari will be the only way to sort of soup within a detachment. I guess you could still have separate detachments, and that would be how you could do a mixed army. So that would still be one option.
Yeah, you can still build out an army made up of multiple detachments, but you lose certain abilities because they all have the Aeldari keyword, which is present in Craftworld as well, and Harlequins. So you can still build armies made up of each of these different factions, but you can't do soup lists, as in one detachment made up of multiple different things, unless it's Ynnari, and even then there's weird restrictions. Hope that answered the question. Next one, Phil.
It did. Yeah, let's go on to the next one from Listen to Bolt Thrower, which I believe is an old metal band that had a 40k cover on it. So he says, what do you think about running the named characters in the new Drukhari list? Is there space for Drazar, Lilith, Urian in the new Real Space Raiders detachment? Or will the Master Rank HQs replace them as more cost efficient? And I believe we sort of covered this in the podcast. I think the general assumption is Drazar and Lilith are good, but potentially most people just take the other options.
Yeah, so Drazar can't go in a Real Space Raiders because you have only 3 HQ slots and you have to take a homunculus, a succubus, and an archon. The succubus can be Lilith, so you can take her, and the homunculus can be I've just forgotten it. Whatever his name is.
Urine, I think.
Yeah, that's it. Urine. Yep. So, so that can be the case, but then the archon has to be something else, and it can't be Drazar. So you have to take another detachment. So you can either take one of those auxiliary detachment things where you can get like 1 HQ or whatever it is, or you take a patrol, or as Paulie was saying, you could take a witch cult thing and then add in Drazar to that. So there are options for adding him in, but you're going to have to add an extra detachment to make him viable, because most people are looking at that as the Real Space Raiders or Real Space Raid as the starting point. Beyond that, yeah, I mean, look, Drazar is very much a valuable inclusion in any army list. I think, we didn't really talk about him because he's been very well publicized. He's incredible. I won't get into the weeds with it right now, but you will always find an excuse to add a Drazar to your army list. Lilith, maybe less so, and Uron Blackheart fella is... I'm not massively sure, I have to be honest with you. I need to probably do some more research on him, but... yeah, I think it's more likely that for the homunculus aspect of it, you're probably going to just look to do it as cheap and cheerful as you can. Anything that you want to add to that, Phil?
No, I think you're pretty much spot on.
Good times.
Got one more. Duffy _paints _minis. He says, as a Coven player, would you now recommend in terms of, or what would you recommend in terms of units and subfaction choices, giving the change/nerf to Prophets of the Flesh? So I think he's particularly talking about the Coven options.
Yeah, no, of course. Well, again, I think, we touched on this in the bulk of the show itself, which is to say the Dark Creed are seemingly the option to take. The addition of that warlord trait that disables objectives secured and actions is really valuable, but also the abilities that they bring to the table are pretty strong. But additionally, it does sound like the Artisans of Flesh or Dark Technomancers are also 2 very strong options for them. So, yeah, it feels like they've got some options there. Although, I mean, Prophets of Flesh don't feel like they've been massively downsized. I mean, there's still some interesting elements to them. But yeah, they're definitely not as easy and auto-include as they were before. So yeah, I think again we've kind of touched on this when we went through the show itself. But yeah, I think those 3 are going to be your options, right? You're going to be looking at Artisans of Flesh, Dark Technomancies, or you're going to be considering whether or not you want to bring the Dark Creed. Yeah,
I think they're all good options. In terms of the units, we didn't really actually cover many of the Coven units, did we? When we were talking.
No, actually, I don't think we actually talked about any of them.
Yeah, because normally the go-to historically has always been the Talos, because everyone loves those. I got the feeling they've been toned down a little bit. They're not as also include as they used to be, but I'm sure they're still pretty decent.
Oh yeah, the Talos has still got a place. I think the thing with the Talos before was it stood out because it was both durable and had quite high damage output, and also had the flexibility of weapon options. So there was a lot of aspects to that made it strong and made it really kind of stand out above other units in the Codex. I mean, it's still 7 wounds at toughness 6. It's still rocking a pretty reasonable, invuln, especially if you do it with the sort of Prophets of Flesh and other bits and pieces. I mean, not as good as it used to be, but still not bad. And yeah, I mean, it's got a good selection of weapons. I can't remember how many points the thing is at this moment in time. I'm just looking at it now. So it's 110 points base, and then it looks like if you max it out, you're going to be looking at 130, which for what you're getting is still pretty reasonable. And again, obviously, if you take it with the the -1 damage ability that I've now just forgotten the name of, and I'm flicking around the book a bit too frantically right now. But yeah, if you take it with the -1 damage, I mean, as we've seen with certain dreadnought lists and things, I mean, they're going to be really tough to get rid of. So yeah, I can easily see valid reasons to taking Taloses for sure. And I think the grotesques are pretty interesting as well. I think the only problem with the grotesques is there's no, the model for them is terrible because it's, you know, a monopose old Finecast mini that is really starting to show its age. So yeah, it'd be nice if some new grotesques came along. So I feel like they're a bit of a muchness, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen grotesques on the battlefield either. I think, or if people
you
were
played
doing...
against. Oh no, you didn't play against Joe with him. I'm confused because Joe used.
He's
Joe
converted
used
some up, hasn't he?
Yeah, and he converted them up using Gene Stealer, Cole, Aberrants, and you played against Aberrants. That's why I got confused.
Ah, right, yes. Yeah, I think he combines the Talos and the Aberrants to... I think that's actually quite a good shout in terms of if you wanted to convert them up. Potentially the other option, I can't remember the name of them off the top of my head, but the House Goliath. There's a couple of models there, like the super hench ones.
The ones with all of the ones that were definitely not inspired by Bane.
Yes. Yeah. those jacked up kids. Yeah. So that would be another option as well.
There you go. Any more, Phil, or should that do for this week?
That's it. Obviously, a couple of other comments just saying looking forward to the show. Great that we're teaming up with Sky Serpent / Real Space Raiders. But yeah, that's it in terms of questions.
Amazing. Well, look, guys, thank you so much for listening. We hope you really enjoyed it. It's been a pleasure doing this. It is now crazy late, and we're going to call it a day. So thank you very much, guys. Check us out next week for another exciting episode of Lookout Sir 40k. Goodbye.
Book of Rust. Goodbye.
Book of Rust. Bye-bye now. Book of Rust.
Bye-bye.